He arrived at the hospital consumed by rage, ready to confront the past he had sworn to forget. But when he opened the door and saw his ex-wife with 3 babies identical to him, the millionaire froze, and all the hatred transformed into emotion. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily. Continuing. Raphael Sterling gazed at New York City from his 40th floor office window. The city seemed small from that height, people reduced to insignificant dots, cars to moving toys. Exactly as he liked it. Control had always been his vice, his obsession. At 38, he commanded one of the largest corporate conglomerates in the United States, with businesses extending from civil construction to emerging technologies. "Mr. Sterling, your father is on line 3. His secretary's voice through the intercom interrupted his thoughts. Raphael took a deep breath, adjusted his Italian tie, and pressed the phone button. "Father?" Just one word. Cold, distant, formal. That was how their relationship worked. A relationship built on foundations of demand, perfection, and results. "Son, I need you to move up the meeting with the Chinese. They want to close the deal sooner than expected." Augustus Sterling's voice sounded authoritative, even at 70. The family patriarch did not know the meaning of the word retirement, much less delegation. Despite officially handing over control of the companies to his son 5 years ago, he remained omnipresent, always watching, always judging. "Impossible. I have the resort launch in the Hamptons, and I can't reschedule." "Do you really think a resort is more important than a $2 billion contract?" Raphael closed his eyes for a moment, suppressing his irritation. No matter how many times he proved his worth, how many successful deals he closed, his father would always treat him like an incompetent apprentice. The resort represents Sterling developments, expansion into the high luxury segment. It's not just a hotel, it's a statement. His voice remained controlled, calculated. "I'll send the international development team to China. Mr. Chen is competent." A heavy silence fell over the line for a few seconds. Raphael could imagine his father on the other end, his face rigid with displeasure, his fingers drumming on the mahogany desk in the mansion study. "Chen doesn't have the Sterling surname." The patriarch's voice was frigid. "Your mother would have been disappointed with your lack of family commitment." The mention of his mother, deceased 15 years earlier, was the final blow, the card Augustus always kept for decisive moments. Raphael felt his jaw clench, but he did not give in. "As I said, I can't go. I have a board meeting tomorrow and the launch on Friday. If you're so eager to close this deal, perhaps you could go personally." Another silence. This one longer. When Augustus spoke again, his voice had that icy tone Raphael had known since childhood. "I see your months of distraction haven't taught you anything about priorities. Perhaps we need to reconsider your position as CEO." Raphael hung up without answering. His father always used the same method. Threaten, pressure, manipulate. That was how he raised him. That was how he turned him into the ruthless executive he had become. Feelings are obstacles to success. The mantra repeated tirelessly throughout his childhood and adolescence, as Augustus prepared him to take over the family empire. And it worked. Raphael became the perfect heir. Cold, calculating, strategic. The man who could fire 300 employees with a single memo and sleep soundly at night. The executive who viewed competitors' bankruptcies as mere necessary side effects, pieces of a game where there was only room for winners, until 8 months ago, when everything began to crumble. Raphael stood up and walked to the small bar discreetly installed in his office. He poured himself a whiskey, neat. The amber liquid burned its way down his throat, a sensation almost welcome compared to the emptiness that consumed him inside. Camilla, the name he avoided pronouncing even in thought, now echoed in his mind. Camilla Hayes, the brilliant architect he met during the Sterling headquarters building project, the woman who, against all odds, penetrated his armor and made him feel something beyond ambition and competitiveness. Camilla, with her innovative designs, her sustainable ideas, her challenging gaze that was never intimidated by his power or wealth. The woman who contradicted him in planning meetings, who defended a less profitable project because people are not numbers on spreadsheets, Mr. Sterling. The woman he surprisingly invited to dinner after a particularly heated argument about the use of local versus imported materials. The woman who refused his first invitation, saying she didn't mix business with pleasure. The woman who, after the project's completion, accepted that same dinner, initiating what would be the greatest transformation in Raphael's life. 2 years together. 2 years of discoveries, conflicts, reconciliations. 2 years during which Raphael slowly began to question the values his father had imposed on him. 2 years in which, for the first time, he allowed himself vulnerabilities, spontaneous laughter, plans that involved more than just acquisitions and profits. 2 years until one ordinary morning, he found the apartment empty and a note on the table. "I tried, Raphael, but I can't keep waiting for you to choose between your empire and a real life. Goodbye." No additional explanation, no subsequent contact. She simply vanished from his life, leaving only that emptiness he now tried, futilely, to fill with overwork and occasional alcohol. The intercom rang again, pulling him from his memories. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Blackwood from Alliance Developments is here for the 4 o'clock meeting." Raphael checked his watch. 4:15. He was late. Something unthinkable in other times. Ask her to wait 5 minutes. He adjusted his suit, took a deep breath, and put Camilla's memories back where he always kept them, locked in some obscure compartment of his mind. He had a company to run, deals to close, an empire to expand. Feelings were obstacles to success. His father was right about that, at least. Leaving the conference room 3 hours later, Raphael felt the typical exhaustion of recent months, before negotiations like the one he had just concluded, the acquisition of a smaller development company, which added 5 strategic plots of land to Sterling's portfolio, would energize him for days. Now, he felt only a dull weariness, as if he were fulfilling a purposeless obligation. "Congratulations, boss." Charles, his financial director and closest friend, if he could call anyone that, greeted him as they walked out together. Ms. Blackwood conceded on almost every point. "We got the land for 30% less than market value." Raphael nodded, unenthusiastically. She had no choice. After the sector crisis, it was either sell or declare bankruptcy, exactly as we predicted when we blocked their financing at the Federal Bank. Charles smiled, admiring the strategy they had implemented months earlier. "Your move was brilliant. Brilliant." The word sounded hollow now. Before, Raphael would have been proud of this kind of maneuver. Identify a promising company, discreetly block its credit lines through strategic contacts, wait for it to weaken, and then offer salvation at a price far below fair value. It was the kind of move his father applauded, the kind that built the Sterling Empire. But today, seeing Marina Blackwood leave the room with red eyes after selling her life's dream, Raphael felt something uncomfortable in his chest, something that felt very much like guilt. "Shall we celebrate? I can call the models from that agency we met last month," Charles suggested as they walked to the elevator. "I'm not in the mood," Raphael replied dryly. "I need to review the resort contracts before the launch." Charles studied him for a moment, his brow furrowed with uncharacteristic concern. "You haven't been going out. You haven't been celebrating victories. You barely show up at social events. This isn't normal, Raphael. I know the breakup with the architect shook you, but it's been 8 months. It's time to move on." Raphael stared at his friend coldly. Charles immediately recoiled, raising his hands in surrender. "Forget I said anything. It's none of my business." The elevator arrived, and they descended in silence to the parking garage. As they parted ways, Charles still tried. "Think about what I said. You're burying yourself in work to avoid facing reality. It's not healthy." Raphael didn't respond. He got into his Porsche and drove through the congested streets of New York City, the luxurious car contrasting with his dark mood. He wasn't going home. The penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side, with its 600 impeccably decorated and absolutely empty square meters, was the last place he wanted to be. Instead, he drove aimlessly, eventually finding himself on the Hudson River Parkway. The sky was darkening, and the city lights were beginning to dot the urban landscape. It was then that his cell phone rang. Unknown number. Normally he would ignore it, but something, perhaps hope, perhaps just boredom, made him answer, "Raphael Sterling." "Mr. Sterling?" A female voice, gut unfamiliar. "I'm calling from St. Catherine's Hospital in Newport, Rhode Island." His heart instantly quickened. Newport, a small coastal town a few hours from New York City, a place he had never visited, but whose name he would recognize under any circumstances. The place where Camilla had said she would go when they talked about places where one could start over. What happened? "You are listed as Ms. Camilla Hayes's emergency contact. She was admitted today and—" Raphael didn't hear the rest. A buzzing filled his ears, and his vision seemed to blur for a second. Camilla. Hospital. Emergency. The words swirled in his mind like a whirlwind. "What's the situation?" he managed to ask after forcing himself to regain composure. "I'm not authorized to give details over the phone, sir, but the patient is stable. She asked us to contact you." She asked, after 8 months of silence, after leaving without real explanations, after leaving only that cryptic note. Camilla was calling him. Reason told him he should ignore it. Move on, as Charles had suggested. But something stronger, more primitive, had already made his decision. "I'll be there in 3 hours," he replied, hanging up immediately. He sharply turned the car at the first available exit, ignoring the angry honk of another driver. He programmed the GPS for Newport and floored the accelerator. His heart beat erratically, a mix of anger, worry, and a feeling he didn't want to name. Why would Camilla seek him out now, after so long? Why would she keep his name as an emergency contact? What could have happened? Raphael's mind seethed with unanswered questions as the car devoured the road. At first, anger predominated. What right did she have to disappear for 8 months and then suddenly call him? Maybe it was money. Maybe she was in some kind of trouble and needed his power or influence to resolve it. Maybe. But as the miles passed, another emotion began to infiltrate beneath the anger. Fear. An irrational, visceral fear of the possibility of permanently losing someone he now realized he had never truly stopped loving. What if it was something serious? What if she was... No, he couldn't even complete that thought. The 3-hour journey turned into 2, with Raphael driving well above the speed limits, ignoring the risk of fines or accidents. When he finally arrived in Newport, a small and charming seaside town, it was past midnight. St. Catherine's Hospital was not large, but it seemed well equipped. He parked haphazardly in front of the building and stormed into the reception area. "Camilla Hayes," he said, so without greetings or introductions, to the sleepy receptionist. "I was called by the hospital. I'm the emergency contact." The woman, accustomed to nervous relatives, remained calm. "Your name, please." "Raphael Sterling." She consulted the computer and nodded. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Miss Hayes is on the 3rd floor maternity ward, room 307. Maternity. The word hit him like a punch. Maternity? Why would Camilla be in... And then, like pieces of a puzzle suddenly fitting together, a possibility he had never considered formed in his mind. 8 months. The exact time since Camilla had left. Enough time to... No, it couldn't be. They had always been careful. Besides, Camilla would have told him, wouldn't she? She wouldn't just leave if she was pregnant with his child. Unless Raphael felt his legs weaken. Unless she had tried to tell him, and he, somehow, had reacted so badly that he made her leave. But he didn't remember such a conversation. He didn't remember Camilla ever mentioning pregnancy. Ignoring the elevator, he ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor. Upon reaching the indicated ward, a nurse tried to stop him, saying something about visiting hours, but Raphael ignored her. He found room 307 and, without knocking, opened the door. The world seemed to freeze. Lying on the hospital bed, pale but still stunning, was Camilla. Her dark hair, longer than he remembered, framed a face that, despite the evident fatigue, still had the power to make his heart skip a beat. But that wasn't what paralyzed him. It was the 3 small bundles in her arms, 3 newborn babies, tiny and perfect, nestled against their mother's chest. Their mother, Camilla's. 3 babies. Triplets. His children. The reality hit him like a tsunami, sweeping away all the anger, all the indignation, all the planning of what he would say when he finally saw her again. Raphael felt his entire body tremble, his legs almost giving way under the weight of that revelation. Camilla looked up when she heard the door. For a fleeting moment, Raphael saw joy in her gaze, the same sparkle that had captivated him from the first day, but it was soon replaced by something more complex. Hurt, apprehension, a shadow of fear. "You came," she said simply, her voice hoarser than he remembered. Hundreds of questions accumulated in Raphael's mind. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you leave? How could you hide this from me? How could you deny me the right to know I was going to be a father?" But faced with that scene, Camilla, exhausted but radiant, holding 3 lives they had created together, the words refused to come out. "They're," he began, his voice failing. "Your children." "Yes," Camilla replied, directly, always direct, always honest. It was one of the qualities he admired most about her. 2 boys and a girl. Raphael took a step forward, hesitant, as if afraid to break the fragile reality of that moment. The nurse had entered behind him, but realizing the situation, discreetly withdrew, closing the door. "Why?" was all he could manage to ask, his mind still unable to fully process what he saw. Camilla's gaze hardened, revealing deep hurt. "You know very well why, Raphael. You made it very clear you didn't want children, that you didn't want that responsibility. Your exact words, if I remember correctly, were, 'Don't look for me. I don't want to know about these children.'" The confusion must have been evident on his face, because Camilla continued, her voice now choked. "I wrote you a letter, Raphael. I told you about the pregnancy as soon as I found out. I explained why I needed time, why I needed to think away from your influence, from your world, and the answer I received." Tears began to stream down her face. It was a cold, cruel email saying you didn't want to know about the bastards, that I should solve my problem alone. Raphael felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. Letter, email. He had never received any letter, never sent such a reply. He would never call his children. The thought was so absurd, so contrary to everything he felt, that he could barely process it. "Camilla, I swear I never received any letter. I never wrote that email. I didn't know." His voice failed again, choked with emotion. "I didn't know you were pregnant, that we would have children. I would never reject my own children." Something in the tone of his voice, in the raw sincerity of his words, made Camilla hesitate. Her eyes, those same eyes that always seemed to read his soul, studied him intensely. "Are you saying you didn't receive my letter? That it wasn't you who replied to my email?" "I'm saying exactly that." Raphael moved closer, cautiously. "Camilla, I looked for you. Not as intensely as I should have, I admit. But I looked. You simply disappeared, leaving only that note saying I had to choose between my empire and a real life. I didn't understand. Not completely. I thought you were tired of my work, of my dedication to the company. I never imagined." He looked at the babies, feeling an overwhelming wave of emotions he had never experienced. The lump in his throat seemed about to choke him. If I had known we would have children, Camilla, I would have dropped everything. Everything. The company, the money, the legacy, none of it would matter. One of the babies began to whimper, a small, vulnerable sound that pierced Raphael's heart, as no difficult negotiation ever had. Instinctively, he reached out, touching the tiny face with a delicacy he didn't even know he possessed. Who would do that?" Camilla asked, confusion now evident. "Who would intercept my letter and reply on your behalf?" Raphael didn't need to think much. The answer was there, obvious, painful. "My father," he said, with a bitter certainty. It could only have been him. Feelings are obstacles to success. He always said that. Family, to him, is just a means to perpetuate the name, the empire. Children are heirs, not people to love. Camilla shook her head, trying to assimilate the possibility. "Your father would do that, go to that extent." "Without hesitation," Raphael replied. feeling a cold rage grow in his chest. "He probably saw your letter as a threat to my focus, to my commitment to the company. 3 children, 3 distractions in his view." He ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. "I will find out the truth, Camilla. I promise. I will get to the bottom of this, and if it was him, he will pay for what he did, for the time we lost, for the moments he stole from me." Another baby began to cry, quickly followed by the third. Camilla, already exhausted, tried to adjust them in her arms. Raphael, seeing her difficulty, acted on instinct. He moved closer and carefully picked up one of the babies, the girl he noted by the pink blanket. The contact with that small being, so fragile, so absolutely dependent, provoked a revolution within him. The girl quieted almost immediately in his arms, as if recognizing, on some primitive level, the father she had never known. Raphael felt tears, something he hadn't shed since his mother's death, stream freely down his face. What are their names?" he asked, his voice trembling. Camilla, watching the interaction with tear-filled eyes, replied, "I haven't chosen yet. I wanted it to be our decision. Despite everything, despite what I thought you had done. I couldn't name them alone." Those words, that admission that, despite the pain and betrayal she believed she had suffered, Camilla had still reserved a place for him in their children's lives, broke something inside Raphael. A sob escaped his lips as he held his daughter against his chest. "I'll fix this, Camilla. I'll find out what happened, and I'll be here for you, for them, if you'll let me." Camilla didn't answer immediately. There were 8 months of pain between them, 8 months of solitude, of decisions made in the belief that she had been abandoned by her children's father. It wouldn't be easy to rebuild trust, one step at a time. "Raphael," she finally said, "first find out the truth, then we'll see." It was fair. More than fair, in fact. Raphael nodded, still gently cradling his daughter in his arms, marveling at the perfection of her tiny features. Can I stay a while?" he asked, uncertain. Camilla hesitated briefly, then nodded. "They're your children too, Raphael. You have every right." That night, in the small hospital room in Newport, something fundamental changed in Raphael Sterling's life. The man who had always believed that feelings were obstacles to success discovered, holding his children for the first time, that there was a different kind of success, one that could not be measured in money, power, or professional achievements, a success that had the exact weight of 3 newborns in his arms and the cautiously hopeful gaze of the woman he had never stopped loving. As he watched the triplets fall asleep, Raphael made a silent promise. He would discover the truth about the letter and the email, and then, regardless of the consequences, he would make the choice he should have made long ago, the choice between his empire and a real life. This time there would be no doubt about his decision. Morning arrived with the first rays of sunlight penetrating through the hospital room blinds. Raphael awoke from the light, uncomfortable sleep in the armchair beside the bed where he had spent the night. His body ached, but his mind was clearer than it had been in months. Camilla was still asleep, her face serene despite the evident fatigue of childbirth. The triplets had been taken to the nursery during the night, allowing the mother a few hours of rest. Raphael watched her sleep, recalling every detail of that face he had tried, unsuccessfully, to forget over the past 8 months. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket, probably Charles Dew's, questioning his whereabouts, or perhaps his father, irritated by his absence from the morning meeting he had certainly forgotten. It didn't matter. Nothing outside that room seemed important now. Careful not to wake Camilla, he got up and silently left the room. He needed coffee, a shower, and above all, he needed to start his investigation. The nurse from the previous night, now replaced by a day shift colleague, recognized him and smiled. "Difficult day, Daddy?" she asked, with the typical familiarity of small towns. Daddy. The word resonated in his mind like a bell. He was a father. He had 3 children, 3 small beings who depended on him, who carried his blood, his DNA, his heritage, not the financial one, which his own father valued so much, but the true heritage, who he was, who he would choose to be for them. "Intense," he replied, trying to smile. Where can I see my children?" The nurse guided him to the nursery, where the triplets slept in small cribs side by side, identified as Baby Hayes A, Baby Hayes B, and Baby Hayes C. The reality that they didn't even have names yet hit him again. Through the glass, Raphael watched them, feeling that same overwhelming emotion from the previous night. They were so small, so perfect, so his. How could he have missed the first 8 months of that pregnancy? How could he have allowed Camilla to face all that alone? The anger against his father and against himself for not having been able to protect his family grew in his chest. He needed to act. He needed to find out the truth, and he needed to reorganize his priorities. Immediately. "Can I use the hospital phone?" he asked the nurse. "My cell phone is out of battery." It was a lie, but he didn't want to use his own phone. He didn't know who might be monitoring his calls. His father had that kind of power and influence. After making a few crucial calls, Raphael returned to Camilla's room, who was now awake, trying to adjust herself in bed with evident discomfort. "Good morning," he said hesitantly, not knowing exactly how to act after everything that had happened. Camilla looked at him, her face a mixture of contradictory emotions. The hurt was still there, along with confusion and, perhaps, a spark of hope. "You stayed all night?" It wasn't a question, but Raphael nodded anyway. "I couldn't leave even if I wanted to." A silence settled between them, laden with unspoken words, necessary explanations, an abyss of 8 months that needed to be crossed. "The babies," Camilla began. "Are beautiful," Raphael completed, a genuine smile escaping his lips. "Perfect, like their mother." Camilla looked away, a slight blush coloring her pale cheeks. "We need to talk, Raphael. About everything. About what happened. About the future." "I know." He moved closer, cautiously sitting on the edge of the bed. "And we will. But first, I need to find out the truth about that letter, about the email you received. I need to prove that I wasn't the one who wrote those cruel words." Camilla studied him for a moment, her dark brown eyes as penetrating as ever. "You seem different," she finally said. Raphael reflected on the observation. Different? Yes, he was different. In less than 12 hours, his entire life had been turned upside down. His priorities, his values, everything he believed important, suddenly reconfigured by the existence of 3 small beings who didn't even know he existed. "I am," he admitted. "When I walked into that room last night and saw you with our children, something changed inside me. Camilla, something fundamental, as if I had spent my entire life pursuing the wrong thing." She didn't respond, just kept watching him with that intensity that always made him feel transparent, as if she could see through his defenses, his carefully constructed armor. "I need to go to New York City," he continued. "I need to confront my father, find out what happened to your letter, but I promise I'll be back today. I promise I won't abandon them. Never again." "Promises are easy to make, Raphael," Camilla replied, her voice firmer now, especially in the heat of the moment. "But the reality is, you have a life there, a company, responsibilities, and we are 4 people you barely know." The words hurt, not for their harshness, but for the truth they carried. He really did have a completely different life in New York City, a life that, until yesterday, would completely define who he was. "You're right," he admitted, surprising her with his frankness. "I have a life there, a life I built following the values my father taught me, values that I now realize are hollow, that haven't brought me real happiness, only power and a loneliness I didn't even recognize until you entered my life." He took Camilla's hand, hesitantly. When she didn't pull it back, he continued, "I'm not asking you to believe me now. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I can be different, that I can be the man you and our children deserve." Camilla closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was determination in her gaze. "Go to New York City, find out the truth. But understand one thing, Raphael. If you come back to us, if you decide to be a part of these children's lives, it will have to be completely. I will not accept half measures. I will not accept being the second option after your company, or having children who only see their father on weekends when he's not busy closing deals." The intensity of her words, the firmness of her stance, was one of the reasons Raphael had fallen in love with her initially. Camilla was never intimidated by his power or position. She never accepted crumbs of his attention or time. "I understand, and I agree," he replied with equal seriousness. "You won't be the second option. They won't be the second option, I promise." Camilla nodded slightly, still cautious, but willing to give him that chance. "The doctors said we'll probably be discharged tomorrow. The babies are doing well, considering they're triplets and were born a little earlier than expected. Do you have somewhere to stay? I mean, here in Newport?" Raphael asked, realizing he knew absolutely nothing about the life Camilla had built over the past 8 months. "I rented a small apartment near the beach. It's not big, but it has 2 bedrooms. I plan to turn one of them into the baby's room." She paused. "It won't be easy taking care of 3 newborns alone, but—" "You won't be alone," Raphael interrupted her, with a conviction that surprised them both. "Not anymore. If you'll allow it." Of course, before Camilla could reply, the door opened and a nurse entered, pushing a small cart with the 3 babies. "Time to feed these little ones," she announced cheerfully. "The pediatrician just examined them. They're all perfect, Mum. Congratulations." As the nurse helped Camilla position herself for breastfeeding, Raphael watched, marveling and slightly embarrassed by the intimacy of the moment. He was about to withdraw when Camilla called him. "Can you hold one of them while I feed the others?" she asked, a challenging look in her eyes. "If you really want to be part of this, you'd better start practicing." The nurse smiled at the panicked expression that must have appeared on Raphael's face. Gently, she showed him how to properly hold one of the boys, while Camilla breastfed the other 2, one at a time. The small baby in his arms, baby Hayes, according to the bracelet on his tiny wrist, looked at Raphael with curious, innocent eyes. Something in that gaze, so similar to his own, touched a deep chord in his chest. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice choked. "I'm your father, and I promise I'll always be here for you, always." Camilla watched the interaction, her eyes tearing up despite her determination to maintain emotional distance until Raphael proved his intentions. For a moment, she glimpsed the man she had fallen in love with. Not the ruthless executive, but the vulnerable, loving man who occasionally appeared from behind his facade of coldness. After breastfeeding and diaper changes, during which Raphael watched attentively, determined to learn every detail, he prepared to leave. "I'll be back today, I promise," he said, reluctant to leave, but knowing that the sooner he confronted his father, the sooner he could return to his newfound family. Camilla nodded, still cautious. "We'll be here." On the way back to New York City, Raphael felt a determination he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the calculating ambition that had guided him for so long, but something more primal, more powerful. The instinct to protect his family, to right the wrong that had been done, to build a future different from the one his father had planned for him. He drove directly to the mansion where Augustus Sterling lived, an imposing palace in Greenwich Dissas, Connecticut, a symbol of the Sterling family's power and tradition. The butler, surprised by his unannounced arrival, tried to inform him that Mr. Sterling was in a meeting, but Raphael ignored him. Striding through the spacious halls to his father's study, he opened the door without knocking, interrupting a conversation Augustus was having with 2 men in suits, probably lawyers or company executives. "I need to speak with you," he said, without preamble, alone. Augustus Sterling, at 70, still possessed the imposing presence that intimidated subordinates and competitors. His eyes, identical to Raphael's, hardened at the intrusion, but his voice remained controlled. "As you can see, I'm busy. Wait in the living room." "No," Raphael replied, his voice firm. "Now." Something in his son's tone must have alerted Augustus that the matter was serious. With a brief gesture, he dismissed the visitors, who quickly left, casting curious glances at Raphael. As soon as the door closed, Augustus leaned back in his leather chair, observing his son with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "What's so urgent it can't wait? The Chinese are—" "Camilla," Raphael interrupted him. "I'm talking about Camilla Hayes." Augustus's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes, a brief flicker of recognition, perhaps of guilt, confirmed Raphael's suspicions. "Your ex-partner, what about her?" Raphael approached the desk, resting his hands on the polished wood, staring directly at his father. "Stop playing games. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The letter she sent me 8 months ago. The letter you intercepted and never gave me. The cruel email you sent in my name, rejecting my own children." This time, the surprise on Augustus's face was genuine. Children? Raphael felt a bitter satisfaction at realizing his father didn't know everything. "Yes, father. Children. Triplets, to be exact. They were born yesterday in Newport. 3 grandchildren you tried to keep out of my life because they didn't fit into your plans for me." Augustus slowly stood up, his face now a mask of calculation. For a moment, Raphael thought he would deny everything, demand proof, accuse him of delirium. Instead, Augustus walked to the window, observing the mansion's impeccable gardens. "It was for your own good," he finally said, his voice surprisingly calm. "That woman was a distraction. You were losing focus. The company needed you concentrated, dedicated." The admission, so casual, so devoid of remorse, made Raphael's blood boil. But he controlled himself, determined to get complete answers. "How did you do it? How did you know about the letter? How did you intercept it?" Augustus turned, facing his son with an almost condescending expression. "Do you really think I don't monitor everything that happens in your life? That I don't have people watching, reporting?" He made a vague gesture. "Your secretary informed me about the letter. I took it before it reached you." "And the email," Raphael pressed, his voice tense. "The cruel email rejecting my children." Augustus shrugged, as if it were trivial. "I accessed your computer when you were in Argentina for that conference. It wasn't difficult. You always used the same password. Your mother's birthday." The casualness with which his father admitted such invasions of privacy, such manipulations, left Raphael momentarily speechless. He had always known Augustus was calculating, ruthless in business, but this was something different, something darker. "Why?" He finally managed to ask. "Why go so far?" "Because you were straying from the path." Augustus replied, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "You were becoming emotional, talking about marriage, about rebalancing priorities." His tone became disdainful. "That woman was softening you, pulling you away from what really matters. And children at this stage of your life would be a complete disaster for the business. You haven't even consolidated your position as CEO yet." "And that's why you decided to destroy my family?" Raphael asked, his voice dangerously low. "That's why you stole 8 months of my children's lives from me, of the pregnancy's development, of their birth?" Augustus looked at him, genuinely confused by his reaction. "I'm protecting our legacy, Raphael, what we built, what your mother valued." "Don't use my mother's name," Raphael shot back, his anger now evident. "She would never approve of this. Never." "You don't know what you're talking about," Augustus retorted, his own irritation beginning to emerge. "Your mother understood sacrifices, understood what's necessary to maintain an empire. She would have done the same." Raphael shook his head, disappointment mixing with anger. "You're so blinded by power that you've even distorted her memory." He took a step back as if wanting to physically distance himself from his father's toxicity. "It's over, father. Your control over me ends today." "What are you talking about?" Augustus asked, a slight tone of concern finally penetrating his arrogance. "I'm talking about not being your puppet anymore. I won't let you manipulate my life, decide my future, sacrifice my happiness in the name of a legacy that only exists in your head." Augustus gave a short, humorless laugh. "And what do you intend to do? Abandon everything? Throw away years of work, of preparation, to destroy what we've built? If necessary, yes." The direct answer caught Augustus by surprise. For the first time, Raphael saw genuine concern in his eyes. "You can't be serious. I won't allow it. You're emotional now. You're not thinking clearly." He tried a more conciliatory tone. "Let's discuss this calmly. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement. The company first, of course. But maybe we can incorporate this unexpected situation." Raphael watched his father trying to negotiate, trying to manipulate even now, and felt a clarity he had never experienced before. "There's nothing to discuss," he said with a finality that surprised even himself. "I have 3 newborn children and a woman who needs me, who deserves much more than what she's received so far, and I intend to be there for them. And the company? Your responsibility? What your great-grandfather built? What your grandfather expanded? What I modernized? Are you going to throw all that away because of a woman and some children?" Raphael felt pity for his father at that moment, pity for a man who reduced love, family, and human connection to a woman and some children, who saw the world exclusively through the lenses of power and control. "The company will continue," he replied, with surprising calm. "But not under my command, not in the way you imagined." "What are you talking about?" Augustus demanded, genuinely alarmed now. "I'm talking about submitting my resignation to the board today. I will resign as CEO and appoint Charles Viana as my interim successor until the board decides permanently." "Charles, that mediocre accountant. You've lost your mind." "Charles is a brilliant executive whom you never properly valued because he doesn't have the sterling surname," Raphael countered. "And yes, maybe I have lost my mind, or maybe, for the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly." Augustus advanced, his face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. I won't allow it." "You have no choice," Raphael replied, unmoved by his father's fury. "I already spoke with my lawyer this morning. The proxies have already been prepared. And if you try to stop me, if you try to use your influence on the board to block my decisions, I'm sure the press would love to know how the great Augustus Sterling manipulated his own son, hid his grandchildren, and forged documents in his name." The threat hung in the air, heavy and inevitable. Augustus paled, finally understanding the seriousness of the situation. "You would destroy the family's reputation, the Sterling name?" "I would protect my new family at any cost," Raphael corrected, determination evident in every word. "The choice is yours." For long moments, father and son stared at each other in silence. Decades of expectations, manipulations, and dysfunctional dynamics crystallized in that confrontation. Finally, Augustus retreated, defeat visible in his gaze. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice now tired. "But you'll wake up one day and realize you threw away your purpose, your inheritance, for an emotional whim." Raphael shook his head, feeling not anger, but a strange peace. "No, father. I'll wake up next to the woman I love, hearing my children's cries, knowing that I've finally found my true purpose. And one day, I hope you understand." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and left the study. He had much to do before returning to Newport. Meetings with lawyers, documents to sign, an entire life to reorganize. But for the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, he felt genuinely free. Free from crushing expectations, free from the suffocating legacy, free to choose his own definition of success. And that definition now had the shape of 3 small cribs in a seaside hospital and the cautious, but hopeful, smile of the woman who had had the courage to show him a different path. "The difference is that I always had that capacity within me, just buried by years of my father's conditioning," Raphael replied thoughtfully. "I don't know if someone like him, after 7 decades of living that way, can truly change so fundamentally." Camilla pondered his words, acknowledging the validity of the argument. She knew Augustus only superficially, but enough to understand the harshness that defined him. Still, she believed in the possibility of redemption, even for the most unlikely candidates. "Perhaps one day," she suggested, without pressing, "when the triplets are older, when you feel ready." Raphael did not respond directly, but his silence was contemplative, not definitive, and that, for Camilla, was already progress. The familiar sound of cries and babbling from the bedroom signaled the end of the triplets' nap. The couple exchanged smiles before heading to the room, ready for another round of the sweet chaos that defined their afternoons. The days leading up to the birthday party were filled with preparations and small domestic crises typical of organizing events with young children. Sophia caught a mild cold, causing momentary concern. Peter developed a sudden aversion to any green food, complicating the menu planning. Matthew discovered how to open drawers, resulting in an emergency reorganization of the entire house to protect dangerous or breakable objects. But finally, on the morning of the big day, everything seemed in order. The weather was perfect, bright sunshine, a gentle breeze, pleasant temperatures. The small beach area they had reserved was decorated with elegant simplicity, white tents, colorful balls, small paper boats scattered on the tables. The boat-shaped cake with 3 miniature crew members waited in pride of place. As guests began to arrive, Camilla watched Raphael greet them with a naturalness that still surprised her. This sociable, relaxed man, who joked with local fishermen and chatted animatedly with neighbors, was almost unrecognizable as the reserved, intimidating executive she had known years ago. The triplets, dressed in matching navy blue and white outfits, were clearly the stars of the event. Sophia, recovered from her cold, smiled shyly at everyone who approached. Peter, fascinated by the decorations, tried to reach every colorful object within his grasp. Matthew, already demonstrating his independent personality, explored the limits of the makeshift playpen they had set up on the sand. "They're so big," Louise, a neighbor who frequently helped with the babies, commented emotionally. "It seems like only yesterday I met them, newborns." "Don't even get me started," Camilla replied, watching her children with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. "Sometimes I miss those early days, when they stayed put wherever we placed them." "Liar," Louise laughed. "Well aware of the chaos of the first few months with triplets, you barely slept. You looked like zombies." "True," Camilla admitted, smiling, but there was something magical about it nonetheless, that constant sense of miracle. "And there still is," Raphael commented, approaching and wrapping an arm around Camilla's waist. "We've just traded the miracle of wow. We created 3 human beings. For wow. They've learned to say no to absolutely everything." The 3 laughed, the shared humor of parents perfectly understanding the mix of wonder and exhaustion that defined the experience. The party proceeded perfectly. The children played under the supervision of volunteer adults. The triplets received constant attention, passing from lap to lap among enchanted friends and neighbors. The simple but delicious food, prepared by a local restaurant that Raphael frequently took tourists to during his tours, was praised by everyone. It was during the cake moment, when everyone gathered to sing Happy Birthday, that Camilla noticed. An older man, standing at a distance, observing the scene, even from afar, even with the added years and visibly diminished appearance, she recognized him immediately, Augustus Sterling. Her heart quickened. She instinctively looked at Raphael, who, busy helping Sophia blow out the candles, had not noticed his father's presence. Camilla hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Alerting Raphael could cause an unpleasant scene amidst the celebration. Ignoring it meant allowing Augustus to continue watching his grandchildren from afar, without permission. Before she could decide, Augustus saw her looking in his direction. For a fleeting moment, their gazes met across the distance, hers questioning, his. There was something there Camilla didn't expect. Vulnerability. Sadness, perhaps. Augustus made a small gesture of acknowledgement, almost an apology for his intrusion, and began to walk away. Impulsively, Camilla touched Louise's arm. "Can you keep an eye on the triplets for a minute?" she asked discreetly. "Of course, dear," her friend replied, taking her position with the children. Camilla quickly moved away, circling the group of guests, before Raphael could notice. She caught up with Augustus when he was already near the makeshift parking area on the beach. "Mr. Sterling," she called, her voice firm despite the apprehension she felt. He stopped, turning slowly. Up close, the transformation was even more evident. The imposing man Camilla had briefly known years ago, during formal meetings for the Sterling headquarters building project, seemed to have aged decades in just a few years. His shoulders, once erect with the posture of one who commands empires, now stooped slightly. His face, marked by new wrinkles, exhibited a worrying pallor. "Ms. Hayes," he greeted, with a formality that sounded anachronistic on the sunny beach. "I apologize for the intrusion. I did not intend to disturb the celebration." There was something disconcerting about seeing Augustus Sterling, the feared businessman who had manipulated so many lives, including theirs, looking almost fragile. "How did you find us?" she asked, keeping a safe distance, still uncertain about his intentions. A tired smile crossed the man's face. "I have my resources," he replied, but without the arrogance the phrase would normally carry. I just wanted to see them, my son's children, my grandchildren." The sincerity in his voice caught Camilla by surprise. She studied him intently, years of architecture teaching her to evaluate structures, to identify hidden fragilities beneath seemingly solid facades. And what she saw now was a structure on the verge of collapse. "You're ill." It wasn't a question. Augustus nodded slightly, acknowledging Camilla's perceptiveness without surprise. "Cancer," he replied simply. "I found out a few months ago. The doctors are not optimistic." The information hit Camilla harder than she expected. Despite everything that man had done, the idea of his suffering, of his imminent mortality, awakened an unexpected compassion. "I'm sorry," she said, and was surprised to truly feel it. "Me too," Augustus replied, his gaze shifting to the party in the distance, where Raphael was now lifting Peter into the air, eliciting laughter from the little one. "For everything." There was a moment of silence between them, filled only by the distant sound of the waves and the laughter from the celebration. "What do you intend, Mr. Sterling?" Camilla finally asked. "Why are you really here?" Augustus seemed to consider the question carefully, as if the answer was too complex to articulate easily. "At first, I just wanted to see them," he admitted, "to see what they were like, these little ones who carry my blood, my name. But now," his gaze met hers, surprisingly direct, "now that I'm here, I realize I wanted more. I wanted to ask for forgiveness, from you mainly, for what I did, for the pain I caused." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but Camilla remained cautious. She knew well that skilled manipulators could sound genuine when necessary. "Why me? Why not Raphael?" "I tried," Augustus replied, a shadow of pain crossing his face. "Several times. He refuses my calls, returns my letters. I don't blame him." He paused, breathing deeply, as if the simple act required effort. "But you suffered the most from my actions. You faced a difficult pregnancy alone, believing you had been rejected. That is unforgivable." Camilla observed the man in front of her, trying to reconcile this repentant and vulnerable version with the calculating manipulator who had intercepted her letter and responded with deliberate cruelty. Was it the same person? Could the imminence of death really transform someone so fundamentally? "Raphael doesn't know I'm here," Augustus continued, correctly interpreting her silence as hesitation, "and I will respect your decision, whatever it may be. If you want me to leave and never appear again, I will do so. If you allow me to see my grandchildren, even if only from afar today, I will be eternally grateful." There was a humility in his tone that Camilla would never associate with Augustus Sterling. It was disconcerting and, simultaneously, moving. "It's not my place to make that decision," she finally replied. "It's Raphael who must decide if he wants you in his life, in our children's lives." Augustus nodded, accepting her words without protest. "I understand. It was a mistake to come," he said, beginning to turn to leave. "Wait." Camilla surprised herself by uttering the word. Something in the visible defeat in Augustus's slumped shoulders had touched her in an unexpected way. "Raphael needs to know you were here, that you're ill. The decision will be his, but he deserves to have all the information." A glimmer of hope appeared in the man's tired eyes. "You'll talk to him?" "Yes," she promised. "Today, after the party. I can't promise what his reaction will be, but I promise he'll know the truth." Augustus took a deep breath, as if a weight had been partially lifted from his shoulders. "Thank you. It's more than I deserve." Camilla hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Where are you staying?" "At the Mariner Hotel, downtown," he replied. "I'll be there until tomorrow." Camilla nodded, memorizing the information. "You should go now," she suggested gently. "If Raphael sees you unprepared—" "Yes, of course," Augustus agreed, seeming genuinely concerned about not causing trouble. He took a step back, but then stopped. "They are beautiful. Your children. They seem happy." "They are," Camilla confirmed, a small smile involuntarily appearing on her lips as she thought of the triplets. "All of us are." Something passed over Augustus's face. Regret, perhaps, see for all he had lost, or perhaps just acceptance of the outcome of his own choices. "That's good," he said simply. "It's all that matters in the end." With that, he turned and walked slowly to a car parked in the distance, where a driver awaited him. Camilla watched as he left, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions in her chest. When she returned to the party, Raphael was waiting for her with a questioning look. "Everything all right?" he asked, concerned. "So you disappeared suddenly?" Camilla forced a smile, deciding not to mention the encounter until they were alone. "Everything's great," she replied, looking at the triplets who were now enthusiastically exploring their presence. "Just sorted out a small unexpected matter." Raphael studied her for a moment, clearly sensing there was more to the story, but respected her discretion in front of the guests. He nodded slightly and turned his attention back to Matthew, who was comically attempting to climb a pile of presents. The rest of the party proceeded without incident, but Camilla couldn't entirely shake the thoughts of the unexpected encounter. How would Raphael react to learning his father had been there? That he was ill, possibly dying, that he sought forgiveness. She knew her husband well now. His capacity for forgiveness, his impressive emotional evolution over the past few years. But the resentment towards Augustus was deep, rooted in decades of manipulation and culminating in the separation that had almost permanently destroyed their family. Would it be possible to overcome that, even in the face of imminent death? When the last guest left and the triplets, exhausted from so much excitement, finally fell asleep, Camilla and Raphael found themselves on the porch of the house, their usual place for important conversations. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, reflecting on the calm sea. "Something happened today," Raphael commented. "Not a question, but an observation. During the party, you seemed distant at times." Camilla nodded, appreciating, as always, the keen intuition he showed regarding her emotional states, another remarkable transformation of the man once focused solely on spreadsheets and corporate strategies. "Your father was there," she said directly, knowing there was no gentle way to present the information. "On the beach, watching from afar." Raphael froze, his entire body visibly tensing. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared intensely at the horizon, as if he could find answers in the reddish sky. "That's when you disappeared," he finally concluded. "You spoke with him." "Yes," she confirmed, carefully observing his reaction. "He was leaving when I approached him." Raphael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Camilla recognized as a sign of internal agitation. "What did he want?" he asked, his voice controlled, but Camilla could perceive the effort behind that apparent calm. "To see the triplets, his grandchildren," she replied honestly. "And he's ill, Raphael. Cancer, apparently in an advanced stage." The news clearly hit him like a physical blow. For an instant, Camilla glimpsed in Raphael's face the boy who, despite everything, still loved his father. The son who, regardless of accumulated hurts, did not wish for the patriarch's death. It was a vulnerability so raw, so unexpected, that Camilla felt her own heart tighten in response. "How much time?" he asked, his voice now faltering. He didn't specify, just said the doctors aren't optimistic. Raphael stood up abruptly, walking to the porch railing, his back to Camilla. His rigid shoulders revealed the emotional storm that surely assailed him. He asked for forgiveness. Camilla continued softly. "From me, specifically, for making me believe you had rejected us, for causing our separation." A strangled sound escaped Raphael, something between a bitter laugh and a suppressed sob. "Deathbed repentance," he murmured, still not turning around. "Convenient." Camilla stood up, approaching cautiously, stopping a few steps from him. She didn't touch him, respecting his space in that delicate moment. "Perhaps," she agreed, "or perhaps the prospect of death really changes something in people, makes them see what truly matters." "Like it did with me," Raphael commented, finally turning to face her. His eyes were moist. something rare even in the new Raphael. When I found out about the triplets, when I realized what I had almost lost. Yes, Camilla nodded gently. Like it did with you. Raphael took a deep breath, trying to organize the avalanche of emotions that clearly overwhelmed him. Where is he? He finally asked. Mariner Hotel until tomorrow, she replied, relieved that he at least considered the possibility of a meeting. He said he'd tried to contact you several times before. He tried, he confirmed, running a hand over his face. I ignored him, returned unopened letters, blocked numbers. I know, and he knows too. He said he doesn't blame you for it. Raphael looked at her, a complexity of emotions on his face that Camilla had rarely witnessed. Anger, hurt, confusion, and something that looked very much like longing. What do you think I should do? He asked, a vulnerability in his voice that tightened her heart. It was a question the old Raphael Sterling would never ask, to sincerely seek someone's opinion, especially on such a deeply personal matter. It was further evidence of the genuine transformation he had undergone. I think you should listen to him, she replied honestly. Not necessarily forgive him, not necessarily reintegrate him into our lives, but listen to him, so that afterward, no matter what happens, you don't carry the weight of unanswered questions. Raphael considered her words in silence, his face gradually softening. And the triplets? He asked. Do you think he should meet them? It was an even more difficult question, involving not only his own hurts, but the well-being of his children. That depends on how your meeting with him goes, she replied cautiously. If you feel there's genuine repentance, if you believe he wouldn't represent a negative influence, then perhaps a brief supervised visit, so they at least have that memory, that connection to their history. Raphael nodded, considering her words seriously. I'll meet him, he finally decided. Tomorrow, alone, initially. Then, we'll see, Camilla smiled, embracing him tightly, feeling his tense body gradually relax against hers. I'm proud of you, she whispered against his chest, of the person you chose to become. They remained like that for some time, embraced under the sky now sprinkled with stars, the sound of the waves in the background as a perfect soundtrack for the moment. There were no guarantees about what the meeting with Augustus would bring, reconciliation, more hurt, or something in between. But Camilla knew that, regardless of the outcome, Raphael would face the situation with the strength and humanity he had developed over the past few years. The next morning, after a silent breakfast, during which Raphael barely touched his food, he prepared for the meeting with his father. He dressed simply, light trousers and a white shirt, so different from the impeccable suits that once defined his image. Do you want me to go with you? Camilla offered, as she watched him prepare, concerned about his emotional state. No, he replied, gentle but firm. I need to do this alone. She nodded, understanding. Before leaving, Raphael stopped in the triplets' room, watching them play animatedly in their cribs. For a long moment, he just observed them, as if reminding himself what truly mattered, what was at stake in any decision about Augustus. I'll be back soon, he promised Camilla, kissing her gently before leaving. The Mariner Hotel was a modest establishment in downtown Newport, frequented mainly by middle-class tourists and business travelers. Nothing compared to the luxury Augustus Sterling was certainly accustomed to, which, in itself, said something about the seriousness of his visit. Raphael found his father in the hotel restaurant, sitting alone at a table in the back, an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. The physical transformation Camilla had described was even more impactful in person. Augustus Sterling, the man who once filled any room with his imposing presence, now seemed almost diminished. When he noticed Raphael approaching, Augustus tried to stand up quickly, a reflex of decades of formality. The movement, however, seemed to require more effort than his weakened body could offer. He wavered, leaning on the table. Son, he said simply, his voice hoarser than Raphael remembered. The term of endearment, rarely used even in the best moments of their relationship, sounded strange now. Raphael did not respond immediately, sitting at the table, observing the man in front of him with a complex mixture of emotions. You're ill, he stated, directly. Augustus nodded, composing himself and sitting down again. Pancreatic cancer. Advanced stage when we found out, he replied, with the same clinical objectivity. And the doctors give me between 3 and 6 months. The information, though expected after Camilla's report, still hit Raphael hard. 6 months? Half a year. Less time than the triplets had been alive. "Why did you come?" he asked, keeping his voice controlled, his hands crossed on the table to hide the slight tremor that affected them. Augustus looked out the window for a moment, as if searching for the right words, something unusual for a man normally so articulate, so precise in his communications. "Initially, out of selfishness," he admitted, turning back to face his son. "I wanted to see my grandchildren before I died. I wanted that connection." The honesty of the answer surprised Raphael. He expected manipulation, perhaps an attempt to evoke pity or guilt. The frankness disarmed him momentarily. "And then?" he asked, realizing there was more. "Then, seeing you all yesterday? The happiness, the family you built? I realized I needed to do more than just observe from afar. I needed to try to fix what I broke." He paused, breathing with apparent difficulty. "Or at least acknowledge the harm I caused." Raphael studied his father intently, looking for signs of falsity, of manipulation, but what he saw was just an aged, sick man facing his own mortality. "Why?" he finally asked, the question that had haunted him for so long. Why intercept Camilla's letter? Why reply in that cruel way? Why try to destroy my family? Augustus did not look away, facing the questions directly. "In my distorted mind, I was protecting you. Protecting our legacy," he replied, his voice low but clear. "I thought children would be a distraction, a burden that would compromise your ability to lead the company, especially 3 at once." He paused, taking a sip of water before continuing. "But the truth I only managed to admit to myself recently, is that I was afraid of losing my control over you, afraid that you would form your own family and no longer need me, my guidance, my approval." The admission was so unexpected, so contrary to the image of the father Raphael had known all his life, that he almost doubted his own ears. "I manipulated you your entire life." "Raphael," Augustus continued, a new vulnerability in his voice, "I molded you in my image because it was easier than facing my own flaws, easier than admitting that perhaps there were other ways to live besides the one I chose." A sad smile crossed his face. "And then you did exactly what I feared most. You chose your own path. You built a better life than mine ever was." Raphael felt a lump in his throat. Decades of repressed emotions, struggling to find expression. "I never wanted to disappoint you," he admitted, surprising himself with the confession. "Even when I broke away, when I left the company, part of me still hoped for your approval. Pathetic, isn't it?" "No," Augustus replied, hesitantly extending his hand across the table, not touching Raphael's, just close. "It's human, and I never deserved that devotion." They fell silent for a moment, the weight of decades of expectations, manipulations, and misunderstandings hanging between them. "I'm dying, Raphael," Augustus finally broke the silence, "and for the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly, seeing the mistakes I made, the time I wasted pursuing power, control, material success, at the expense of real connections, of genuine love." His eyes, so similar to Raphael's, met his son's with intensity. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I regret it, deeply, and that I'm proud of the man you've become, despite me, not because of me." The words hit Raphael like successive waves, each more impactful than the last. Pride, regret, recognition of mistakes. Everything he had secretly longed to hear his entire life, now offered when he least expected it, when he had already given up on receiving it. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said honestly, his voice trembling. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely overcome what you did." Augustus nodded, accepting his words without protest. "I understand, and I respect your decision, whatever it may be." Another silence settled between them, less tense than the previous one, but still laden with unresolved emotions. "Would you like to meet your grandchildren?" Raphael finally asked, the question surprising them both. Augustus's eyes widened slightly, a glimmer of hope appearing in them. "Yes," he replied simply, "more than I can express." Raphael considered for a moment, evaluating not only his own complex feelings, but also what would be best for the triplets, for Camilla, for the family they had built. "Not today," he decided. "I need time to process all this, to talk with Camilla, to be sure it's the right thing to do." The disappointment on Augustus's face was evident, but he nodded in understanding. "How much longer do you have in Newport?" Raphael asked. "I plan to leave today," he replied. "But I can extend my stay if—" "Extend it?" Raphael interrupted him. "For 2 days, I'll give you my answer by then." A small smile appeared on Augustus's tired face. "Thank you for the opportunity, for listening to me." Raphael stood up. The conversation clearly ended for now. He felt emotionally exhausted, as if he had run a marathon. He needed space, time to process everything he had heard, everything he had felt. "See you soon, Father," he said, the word "father" escaping almost involuntarily. Augustus seemed touched by the word, his eyes visibly tearing up. "See you soon, son." Raphael left the hotel with his mind in a whirl. Instead of driving directly home, he drove to the beach, parking the car and walking along the sand, letting the sea breeze and the sound of the waves calm his agitated thoughts. The meeting had been nothing like he expected. He had prepared for anger, for manipulation, for a clash of wills like so many they had had in the past. Instead, he found a fragile man, facing not only his mortality, but the weight of his own mistaken choices. Raphael's rational side still questioned the sincerity of Augustus's repentance. It was too convenient, perhaps, this sudden recognition of errors as death approached. And yet, there was something genuine in the vulnerability shown, something that the old Augustus Sterling would never allow to be seen. Even more disconcerting was realizing that, despite everything, despite the manipulation, the attempt to destroy his family, love still remained. A complicated, damaged love, but still present. There was still the boy who admired his father, who sought his approval, who wanted his pride. Would it be possible to forgive, not just for the words spoken today, but for decades of toxic conditioning, of crushing expectations, of conditional love offered only upon perfection and obedience, and the triplets? What right did they have to meet their grandfather? What impact would this brief encounter with a man who would soon no longer be present have on their lives? Would it be cruel to introduce them only to soon have to deal with another loss, so young? Raphael had no answers, only questions that swirled in his mind as he walked along the beach, the warm sun above, the sand beneath his feet, the constant sea beside him. When he finally returned home, hours later, he found Camilla in the living room, the triplets taking their afternoon nap. She looked at him with evident concern, standing up immediately upon seeing him enter. "How was it?" she asked, her voice soft. Raphael hugged her without answering immediately, just holding her tightly against him, as if seeking an anchor in a world that seemed to have shifted once again beneath his feet. "Difficult," he finally replied, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Different from what I expected." They sat on the sofa, and Raphael recounted the conversation in detail, Augustus's physical fragility, the surprising admissions, the seemingly genuine repentance. "I believe he's being sincere," he concluded, surprising himself with the assessment. "Perhaps it's the proximity of death, perhaps it's truly an internal change, but it seems real." Camilla listened attentively, without interrupting, offering only her presence, her silent support. When he finished, she took his hands in hers. "What do you want to do?" she asked simply. Raphael appreciated, as always, the way she placed his needs, his feelings at the center of the matter, without trying to influence his decision. "Part of me wants to forgive," he admitted, "not for him, but for me, so I don't carry this resentment for the rest of my life." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "And another part fears I'm being manipulated again, that this is just another strategy to get what he wants." Camilla nodded, understanding his doubts. "And about the triplets?" she asked. "Do you want them to meet him?" It was the most difficult question, the one that had occupied much of his thoughts during the solitary walk on the beach. "Yes," he finally replied, the certainty emerging only at the moment he uttered the word. Yes, I want them to know who their grandfather is, even if briefly. I want them to have that connection to their history, to their roots. A small smile appeared on Camilla's lips. I think it's the right decision, she said softly, for all of you. Raphael looked at her with gratitude, marveling once again at her capacity for understanding, for forgiveness, for seeing beyond the immediate pain to the larger picture. How do you do it? He asked. How can you support a meeting between our children and the man who tried to separate them from me? Camilla reflected for a moment before answering. Why? Because I believe people can change, she said simply. You changed in ways I never imagined possible. She smiled. And because our children deserve to know all parts of their story, the good and the bad. They deserve the chance to form their own opinions, their own connections. Raphael nodded, feeling more secure in his decision with her support. I'll call him, he decided. Invite him to come here tomorrow. A brief, supervised meeting. A good idea, Camilla agreed. On our territory, on our terms. That night, after making the invitation which Augustus accepted, with barely suppressed emotion in his voice, Raphael watched the triplets sleep, thinking about family circles, legacies, and inheritances that go beyond money and companies. What kind of grandfather would Augustus have been if his priorities were different? If he valued connection above control, love above power? And what kind of father would Raphael himself be if he hadn't broken the cycle, if he hadn't chosen a different path when he had the chance? Unanswered questions, possibilities that would never materialize. But there was hope in the new possibilities that emerged. A meeting, a partial reconciliation, a closure before it was too late. The following afternoon, precisely at 3 o'clock, Augustus Sterling arrived at the seaside house, brought by a driver who helped him walk to the entrance. Raphael greeted him at the door, noticing how each step seemed to require considerable effort. Thank you for the invitation, Augustus said, his voice betraying the emotion he tried to contain. It means more than I can express. Raphael nodded, guiding his father to the spacious, airy living room where Camilla waited with the triplets, each engrossed with their favorite toys scattered on a large, colorful rug. When Augustus entered and saw the three little ones up close for the first time, he stopped, as if the impact was too physical to bear. Raphael observed his father's face, emotions passing over it in visible waves: wonder, pain, regret, joy. They are perfect, he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. Camilla approached, greeting him with surprising warmth. Mr. Sterling, welcome to our home. Augustus, please, he requested, and thank you for allowing this visit. I know I don't deserve such kindness. Raphael indicated an armchair near the rug where the children were playing. Sit down, father. You look tired. The deliberate use of the word father did not go unnoticed. Augustus looked at him with gratitude as he carefully settled into the armchair. The triplets, initially oblivious to the stranger's presence, soon noticed the visitor. Sophia, always the most sociable, was the first to show interest. Crawling towards Augustus with determination, a colorful block in her small hand. It looks like Sophia wants to show you something, Raphael commented, watching his daughter approach her grandfather. The girl stopped in front of Augustus, holding up the block in silent offering. The man looked at Raphael, as if asking permission, before extending his trembling hand to receive the gift. Thank you, little one, he said, his voice choked. It's a beautiful color. Sophia smiled, that contagious smile that lit up her entire face, and Augustus seemed to visibly melt, the last barrier of formality and reserve crumbling before his granddaughter's innocence. Encouraged by their sister's example, Peter and Matthew soon joined the interaction, each in his own way. Peter observing his grandfather with a calculating curiosity so similar to Raphael's own, Matthew offering toys with almost excessive enthusiasm. At one point, when the triplets were momentarily distracted with other toys, Augustus looked at his son with tear-filled eyes. They are extraordinary, he said. They have your intelligence, but her kindness. He indicated Camilla with a respectful gesture. A perfect combination. Raphael nodded, unable to disagree with the assessment. And you, Augustus continued, turning back to Raphael, seeing you with them, you're a better father than I ever was. more present, more loving, more human. The observation, painful but true, hung between them, an acknowledgement of a fundamental flaw that was now too late to completely correct. As the afternoon wore on, Augustus's fatigue became increasingly evident. His breathing grew more labored, his face paler. Finally, recognizing his limits, he asked to leave. "Thank you for this invaluable gift," he said, as Raphael helped him up from the armchair. "I will carry the memory of this day with me." The clear implication that this memory would accompany him until his last moments hung silently between them. Before leaving, Augustus turned to Camilla, who was holding Sophia in her arms. "I can never adequately compensate for the harm I caused," he said. "But I want you to know that I deeply regret it, and that I am grateful for your generosity in allowing this visit, this connection." Camilla nodded, accepting his words with grace. "I hope you find peace," she replied simply. At the door, father and son faced each other one last time. Both knew, though they didn't say it aloud, that they would likely not see each other again. Augustus's health was visibly deteriorating, and the distance, geographical and emotional, remained too significant for frequent visits. "I love you, son," Augustus said, the words sounding strange, almost out of place, and after decades of communication based on expectations and evaluations, never on explicit affection. "I always loved you. I just didn't know how to show it adequately." Raphael felt the lump in his throat, conflicting emotions fighting for supremacy, the hurt of the neglected child, the anger of the manipulated adult, and now, surprisingly, compassion for the fragile man who finally faced his flaws. "I love you too, father," he replied, the words more true than he expected when he uttered them, despite everything. A brief hug, the first in many years, sealed the encounter. No impossible promises to be kept, no false expectations of complete reconciliation, just the mutual recognition of a bond that, though damaged, would never be completely broken. When Augustus's car disappeared into the distance, Raphael remained on the porch for some time, observing the marine horizon, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. The weight of decades of resentment not completely eliminated, but certainly alleviated. Camilla joined him silently, sliding her hand into his, offering presence without demanding words. "Thank you," he said finally, "for encouraging this meeting, for believing there was something to be saved." She smiled, gently squeezing his hand. "Some things are worth trying for, even when the outcome isn't perfect." They returned to the living room together, where the triplets continued their tireless explorations of the world, oblivious to the adult drama they had just witnessed, oblivious to the complexities of the family legacies they would one day inherit. Raphael watched his children, Sophia's dark hair so similar to Camilla's, Peter's inquisitive gaze that many said resembled his own, Matthew's restless energy that didn't resemble anyone specific, just life in its purest expression. He thought of his father, of the empire he had built, of the legacy he had so valued, and he realized that he had chosen a different legacy, not of skyscrapers or bank accounts, but of shared moments, of laughter, of small daily discoveries, of love without conditions or expectations. Night fell over Newport, enveloping the seaside house in soft shadows. On the porch, Raphael and Camilla watched the stars appear one by one in the dark sky, the triplets finally asleep after a day of emotions and discoveries. "What are you thinking about?" Camilla asked, noticing her husband's contemplative expression. "Choices," he replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. "How a single decision can completely change the course of a life." He thought of Augustus, of his choices over the decades, culminating in the solitude of his last days. He thought of himself, of the decision he had made upon discovering the triplets, upon confronting his father, upon abandoning the empire to build something completely different. He thought of Camilla, of her courage to face a multiple pregnancy alone, of her strength to rebuild trust after perceived betrayal, of her capacity to forgive and start anew. "Do you think we made the right decisions?" he asked, a rare moment of doubt in his usually confident voice. Camilla considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think we made the best decisions we could with the information we had at the time," she replied, "and that we continue to do so every day." Raphael nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her words. There were no guarantees in life. only choices made with honesty and courage, moment by moment. "Are we happy here?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Camilla smiled, that smile that still made his heart race even after so long. "Very," she replied simply, "more than I ever imagined possible." They fell silent for a moment, soaking in the stillness of the night, the distant sound of the waves, the occasional sigh coming from the triplets, room through the baby monitor. "You know what I sometimes think," Camilla commented. "That intercepted letter, that cruel email, they were the best thing that could have happened to us." Raphael looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," she explained. "If we had followed the normal path, if I had told you about the pregnancy and we had stayed together without that separation, would you have really changed so fundamentally? Would you have really chosen between your empire and a real life?" Raphael reflected on the question, genuinely considering it. "I don't know," he admitted. "Perhaps eventually, but I probably would have tried to reconcile the two worlds for a long time, being the ruthless CEO during the day and the present father at night." He smiled sadly. "And I probably would have failed at both." "Exactly," Camilla agreed. "Sometimes we need to lose something completely to realize its true value, to make choices we would never make if we had the illusion that we could have everything." It was a profound observation, and Raphael felt its impact. Indeed, the absolute loss, believing Camilla had left forever, discovering the children already born, realizing everything he had almost irreversibly lost, had been the catalyst for his complete transformation. "So should we thank my father?" he asked, a note of dark humor in his voice. Camilla chuckled softly. "Perhaps not thank him, but recognize that even the worst intentions can eventually lead to unexpectedly positive outcomes." Raphael pulled her closer, wrapping her in a side hug as they continued to gaze at the starry sky. "You always find the positive side," he commented, admiration evident in his voice. "Even in the darkest situations, someone has to counterbalance your occasional pessimism," she gently teased. They laughed together, the intimacy of the moment amplified by the deep understanding they had developed over the past few years, not just as lovers or parents, but as genuine life partners. The baby monitor transmitted a small whimper, followed by silence. Both remained attentive, ready to act if necessary, relaxing only when it became clear that the baby, probably Matthew, always the most restless during sleep, had calmed down on his own. 5 years ago, Raphael reflected, if someone told me that today I would be here, in this seaside house, with you and 3 one-year-old children worrying about night whimpers instead of market fluctuations, I would have thought it absurd. "And yet, here we are," Camilla replied. "And you wouldn't trade it for anything, admit it." "Not for all the sterling empire multiplied by 1,000, he confirmed, without hesitation. "This is the choice I would make again, every day, for my entire life." Camilla turned in his arms, kissing him softly. "That, Mr. Sterling, is exactly the right answer." Under the starry sky of Newport, with the sound of the waves in the background and the baby monitor transmitting the gentle breaths of their children, Raphael and Camilla once again sealed the choice they had made, not between an empire and a real life, but for the only life that truly mattered. The one they built together, day after day, choice after choice, with love, respect, and the awareness that the best things are rarely the easiest, but always the ones worth fighting to preserve. The sun rose over Newport, its first golden rays penetrating through the windows of the seaside house. Raphael woke before his alarm clock, as often happened since he became a father. He turned in bed, watching Camilla still asleep, her breathing deep and tranquil, her serene face framed by dark hair spread across the pillow. 5 years had passed since Augustus's visit. 5 years since that emotionally charged afternoon when 3 one-year-old babies briefly met a grandfather they would not see grow up. Augustus had passed away 4 months after the encounter, more quickly than doctors predicted. Raphael had traveled to the funeral alone, a final farewell marked by the emotional ambivalence that had always defined his relationship with his father. Augustus's death brought unexpected changes. The will revealed surprises. In his last months, the patriarch had reorganized his empire. Most of his company shares had been converted into a charitable foundation focused on early childhood education and support for low-income families. The remainder was divided between Raphael and some loyal former employees who stayed until the end. A letter accompanied the will, addressed to Raphael. I finally understood that true legacy is not measured in buildings or bank accounts, but in the positive impact we leave. Perhaps it is too late for me, but it is never too late to correct mistakes. Thank you for showing me the way, even unintentionally. The patriarch's change, though late, had apparently been genuine. Raphael accepted his share of the inheritance not out of financial necessity. His ecological tourism company had prospered beyond expectations, as had Camilla's sustainable architecture projects, but as a symbol of posthumous reconciliation, of acceptance of a completed cycle. The money was invested primarily in the triplets' future, in funds for their education, and in the development of their own foundation, which Raphael and Camilla established to support marine conservation and environmental education projects. Careful not to wake Camilla, Raphael got up and went to his children's room, no longer babies, but active 6-year-olds, each with a distinct and well-defined personality. They now shared 2 rooms, Sophia in one, decorated with marine themes in pastel tones, her passion for mermaids and ocean creatures evident in every detail, Peter and Matthew in the other, a harmonious combination of both their interests, dinosaurs, astronauts, and inevitably boats. He stopped at the boys' bedroom door, smiling to see the 2 beds already empty. As was typical, they had woken early and would probably be in the living room or on the porch, plotting some new adventure or experiment. The sound of low voices and suppressed laughter guided him to the kitchen, where he found not only Peter and Matthew, but also Sophia, all 3 sitting around the table, trying, with questionable results, to prepare something that appeared to be breakfast. "Good morning, pirates," he greeted, holding back a laugh at the flour scattered on the floor, the eggshells arranged in a curiously symmetrical pattern, and what he suspected was spilled orange juice forming a small lake on the table. "Dad!" Sophia exclaimed, her dark eyes, so similar to Camilla's, shining with excitement. "Now we're making a surprise for you and Mom." "I see that," Raphael replied, approaching to examine the culinary creation. "And what surprise would that be?" "Special breakfast," Peter explained, always the natural spokesman for the group. "Because today is an important day." Raphael frowned, trying to remember if there was any significant date he might have forgotten. "It's your wedding anniversary, Dad," Matthew clarified, rolling his eyes with that exasperation only 6-year-olds can express at adults: forgetfulness. Wedding anniversary, of course. 4 years since the simple beach ceremony, with the 2-year-old triplets as impromptu ring-bearers, carrying the rings with the solemnity they could maintain for approximately 30 seconds. Technically, it wasn't the anniversary of their relationship, which had already lasted almost 9 years, counting the period before the separation. But it was the day they had chosen to formalize what they already knew, that they had found in each other exactly what they needed. "You remembered?" Raphael smiled, genuinely touched. "I'm impressed. Aunt Louise reminded us yesterday," Sophia admitted honestly, and helped plan the surprise. "But the execution is all ours," Peter quickly added, proud. Raphael examined the creation more closely. Pancakes slightly burnt at the edges and significantly raw in the center. Partially spilled orange juice, and what he suspected was an attempt at decoration with chocolate syrup, forming abstract designs that defied interpretation. "It's absolutely perfect," he declared, and it truly was, though not by conventional culinary standards. "Your mother will love it." "Shall we wake her?" Matthew asked, always the most impatient of the 3. "Let me check if she's already waking up," Raphael suggested, knowing Camilla's need for a few full hours of sleep, especially after an intense week finishing a large project. "In the meantime, how about we clean up this battlefield a bit?" The triplets reluctantly agreed, and together they began the cleanup operation. In reality, a second battle that involved more spilled flour, spilled water, and suppressed laughter to avoid waking Camilla. When they finally achieved an acceptable state of organization, Raphael helped the children arrange the special pancakes, juice, and some fresh fruit on a tray decorated with drawings made by the children. "Let's surprise her," Sophia suggested, excited. The 4 headed to the bedroom, Raphael balancing the tray, while the children tried to contain their excitement enough not to run ahead. Reaching the door, Sophia knocked softly. "Mommy, can we come in?" A sleepy murmur came from inside, followed by a slightly more awake, "Sure, come in." Raphael opened the door, and the triplets rushed in, jumping onto the bed with the inexhaustible energy typical of their age. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison, as Camilla sat up, laughing at the sudden attack of enthusiastic little bodies. "What is this?" she asked, feigning complete surprise, though the smile on her lips indicated she had guessed. "Special breakfast for your wedding anniversary," Peter explained, resuming his role as spokesman. "We made pancakes," Sophia added. "And juice," Matthew completed. "And we made a huge mess, but we cleaned it all up." "Almost all," Raphael corrected, smiling as he placed the tray on the nightstand and leaned in to kiss Camilla. "Happy anniversary, happy anniversary," she replied, her eyes shining with that unique blend of love and amusement that was so characteristically hers. What a wonderful surprise. The five settled onto the king-size bed, the tray between them, as Raphael discreetly helped cut off the rawest parts of the pancakes, ensuring no one would have a traumatic gastronomic experience first thing in the morning. "We have presents too," Sophia announced, after a few minutes of cautious tasting of the culinary creations. Before the parents could respond, the triplets jumped off the bed and ran to their rooms, returning moments later with packages clearly wrapped by small, enthusiastic hands. "Open mine first," Matthew insisted, pushing an irregularly shaped package wrapped in bright blue paper. Camilla took the package with appropriate solemnity for the occasion and carefully opened it. Inside, she found a small wooden boat, clearly handmade, painted in vibrant colors with Sterling family, written on the side in uneven letters. "It's beautiful, Matthew," she said, genuinely impressed. "Did you make it yourself?" "Uncle Michael helped with the hard parts," he admitted, referring to the local carpenter who occasionally gave classes to children in the community. "But I painted it all myself." "It's a masterpiece," Raphael commented, examining the boat with admiration. "It will look perfect on the living room shelf." Peter was next, offering a more organized package, wrapped in green paper. "It's for both of you," he clarified, as Raphael opened the present. It was a handmade book with pages of colored cardstock carefully bound together. On the cover, in large, colorful letters, the story of our family. Inside, drawings and small texts written in the hesitant handwriting of a 6-year-old boy, telling their story from Mommy and Daddy met working to now there are 5 of us and we have the best boat in Newport, Peter, Camilla murmured, flipping through the pages with tear-filled eyes. "This is the most special gift we've ever received. The teacher helped with the writing," he explained, proud, "but the ideas were all mine." Finally, Sophia presented her gift, a small box wrapped in delicate pink paper. Raphael opened it and found a handmade necklace. Smaller, colorful shells alternated with wooden beads, forming a surprisingly harmonious piece for having been made by such young hands. "For you to wear always, Mommy," Sophia explained. "There's a shell for each of us. The biggest one is me, the blue one is Peter, the green one is Matthew, the white one is Daddy, and the pink one is you." The simplicity and symbolism of the gift touched Camilla deeply. She immediately put on the necklace, hugging her daughter tightly. "I'll never take it off," she promised. "It's perfect, Sophia." The triplets beamed with pride, clearly satisfied with the reception of their carefully planned presents. "Now do you two have presents for each other?" Peter asked, always practical and direct. Raphael and Camilla exchanged amused glances. "Actually, yes," Raphael replied. "But we'll save them for later, when we're alone." "Why?" Matthew questioned, confused. "Are they adult presents?" Camilla laughed. "Something like that," she replied diplomatically. "But we have a present for you, too." The children looked at each other, surprised. "For us? But it's your anniversary," Sophia argued, her logic impeccable. "Yes, but our present is for the whole family," Raphael explained, winking at Camilla. "Says, it's a surprise we've been planning for a while." The triplets' curiosity was palpable, their eyes wide with anticipation. "You know how Daddy has been talking about expanding the tourism company," Camilla began, choosing her words carefully. All 3 nodded. Over the past few years, ocean life ecotourism had grown significantly, from a single boat to a small fleet of 5 vessels, all operating on sustainable principles and focused on environmental education. And how Mommy has been getting bigger and bigger projects in different places, Raphael continued. Again, the triplets nodded. Camilla's work with sustainable architecture had gained national recognition, with projects in several cities across the United States. Well, we decided to combine these two aspects, Camilla revealed, smiling. We bought a bigger boat, much bigger. The children's eyes widened even further. Like a yacht? Peter asked, excited. Not exactly, Raphael corrected. It's a sailboat big enough for us to live on. A moment of silence as the triplets processed the information. We're going to live on a boat, Matthew finally exclaimed, jumping on the bed with explosive enthusiasm. For a year, Camilla clarified. We're going to sail along the U.S. coast. Daddy can expand the business to new locations. I can visit the sites of my projects. And you... Are we going to study on the boat? Sophia asked, her practical mind already considering the logistical aspects. Exactly, Raphael confirmed. We'll have a private teacher traveling with us. It will be an incredible educational experience. Geography, marine biology, history of coastal cities, all first-hand. The triplets exploded with excitement, talking all at once, asking questions they barely waited to be answered before launching others. And when are we going? Peter managed to ask amidst the chaos. In 2 months, Camilla replied. Enough time for you to finish your school year, for us to finalize preparations, and for us to learn the basics of sailing. Do we have the boat already? Can we see it? Matthew asked, already jumping off the bed as if expecting to leave immediately to see the vessel. Yes, it's anchored in Boston, Raphael explained. We'll visit it next weekend. The excitement was so great that it took almost an hour to calm the triplets enough for them to finish breakfast. The rest of the morning was filled with endless questions, enthusiastic plans, and speculations about the adventures that awaited them. When the 3 finally went out to play on the beach, under the supervision of Louise, who had arrived to allow the couple a few anniversary hours alone, Raphael and Camilla found themselves again on the porch, watching their children run along the sand with inexhaustible energy. Do you think we made the right choice? Camilla asked, leaning back against Raphael's chest as he embraced her from behind. A year living on a boat with 3 6-year-olds. It sounds crazy when said aloud. Raphael chuckled, kissing the top of her head. It probably is crazy, he agreed. But when haven't our best decisions been slightly crazy? It was true. From Camilla's decision to leave New York City pregnant with triplets to start anew in a small town, to Raphael's decision to abandon a corporate empire to start a small-scale ecological tourism company, their most significant choices had always defied conventional logic. Besides, Raphael continued, his voice acquiring that contemplative tone he had developed over the years, the children are at the perfect age, young enough to marvel at every discovery, but old enough to truly absorb and remember the experience. Camilla nodded, turning in his arms to face him. It's funny, she commented. When we met, you were obsessed with control, with detailed plans, with predictability, and now here you are, advocating for a year of unstructured adventures on a sailboat. Raphael smiled, acknowledging the irony. Our people change, he replied simply. Sometimes they just need the right motivation. He looked past her, to the beach, where the triplets were now building an elaborate sandcastle, working together with the natural synchronicity they had always shown. Despite their distinct personalities, they were my motivation, he continued. They and you. They made me realize that there are more forms of success than numbers on spreadsheets, more forms of security than bank accounts. Camilla studied him, noticing the small changes the years had brought, a few silver threads at his temples, more defined lines around his eyes, mainly from smiles. But what impressed her most was the inner transformation, reflected in the calm of his gaze, in the genuine satisfaction that radiated from him. So, are we really doing this? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Selling the house, storing what we can't take, and setting off to live on the ocean for a year. We are, Raphael confirmed, his eyes shining with anticipation, unless you've changed your mind. No, she replied without hesitation. I think it will be the greatest adventure of our lives, and they will love every minute." They sealed the agreement with a kiss, not the passionate kiss of new lovers, but the comfortable, secure kiss of partners who had built a life together, who had weathered storms and sailed into calm waters, only to voluntarily seek new adventures, new discoveries. The sailboat, christened 3 Stars in honor of the triplets, was an impressive vessel, 65 feet long, with 4 cabins, a spacious living area, a functional galley, and state-of-the-art navigation equipment. Built for long ocean voyages, it combined comfort with safety and sustainability, using solar and wind energy to minimize environmental impact. The triplets' first visit to the boat the following weekend was an explosion of enthusiasm. They ran back and forth, exploring every corner, every compartment, imagining themselves already at sea, spotting dolphins and whales, discovering deserted beaches and historic towns. "This will be my room," Sophia declared, claiming one of the smaller cabins in the bow. "We'll take that one," Peter and Matthew decided in unison, pointing to another cabin with built-in bunks. While the children explored, Raphael and Camilla chatted with the experienced captain who would accompany them for the first few months, until they developed enough skills to navigate independently on less challenging stretches. "It's an excellent boat," Captain Ernest commented, a middle-aged man with sun-weathered skin and eyes that always seemed to search the horizon. "Safe, stable, ideal for a family, but a year at sea with 3 children," he smiled, shaking his head. "You are brave, or completely crazy," Raphael completed, returning the smile. "Probably a bit of both," the captain agreed. "But it's these seemingly insane decisions that usually make for the best stories later." The next 2 months passed in a whirlwind of preparations. The house was rented for a year to a family from New York City, seeking exactly the tranquil lifestyle Newport offered. Non-essential belongings were carefully stored. Raphael organized the expansion of the company, with local managers taking over daily operations in Newport, while he would establish contacts in new points along the coast. Camilla coordinated her architectural projects to coincide with planned stops during the journey. The triplets completed the school year with exemplary grades, all demonstrating the sharp intelligence they had inherited from their parents, though directed to different areas. Sophia excelled in arts and literature, creating elaborate stories and impressive drawings. Peter showed a natural aptitude for mathematics and science, always questioning, always seeking to understand the mechanisms behind things. Matthew, too, though equally intelligent, excelled primarily in physical and social activities, his natural charisma and inexhaustible energy making him a favorite of classmates and teachers. Bianca, the young teacher hired to accompany them during the journey, visited the family several times before departure, getting to know the children, assessing their educational levels, and developing a personalized curriculum that incorporated the unique experiences they would have during the trip. Finally, on a clear October morning, the Sterling family prepared to depart. The small community of Newport organized a modest farewell party on the beach. Neighbors, company employees, friends made over the years, all gathered to wish them a good journey and a safe return. Louise, who had become practically part of the family, couldn't hold back tears as she hugged the triplets. "Come back bigger and wiser," she said, emotional. "But not so big that you don't want Aunt Louise's cookies anymore." "Impossible," Matthew guaranteed, returning the hug enthusiastically. "We'll send emails telling you everything. And bring presents from every place we visit," Sophia promised. "And learn how to make sea cookies," Peter added, always practical. Raphael's company employees organized a small ceremony, presenting him with a carved wooden plaque to be installed on the sailboat. "Ocean Life, Sterling Family Expedition, 2020-2021. Michael, the carpenter who had helped Matthew with his present months earlier, had crafted the piece with evident care. "To remember where you came from as you discover new horizons," he explained, as Raphael, visibly moved, thanked him. After the farewells, the family boarded a small dinghy that would take them to the 3 Stars, anchored a little beyond the beach. Captain Ernest awaited them, along with Bianca and Charles, Raphael's former financial director and friend, who had surprisingly asked to accompany them on the first leg of the journey to Miami. I need to see with my own eyes the great Raphael Sterling living as a sailor, he joked, as he helped carry the last bags aboard. No one in New York City would believe me if I just told them. The sailboat set sail to applause and waves from the beach, its white sails majestically filling with the morning breeze. The triplets, positioned at the bow, waved enthusiastically to their friends who grew smaller and smaller in the distance. Raphael and Camilla remained on deck, arms around each other, watching the Newport coast gradually diminish on the horizon. The city that had welcomed them at one of the most crucial moments of their lives, that had witnessed the birth of their children, the rebirth of their love, the complete transformation of their priorities and values. "We're really doing this," Camilla murmured, a mix of excitement and nostalgia in her voice. "We are," Raphael confirmed, holding her closer, sailing into the unknown. It wasn't just a figurative expression. Although they had a planned itinerary, with specific stops along the U.S. coast, there was an element of unpredictability inherent in life at sea, changing weather conditions, unexpected discoveries, unplanned experiences. The journey certainly wouldn't follow a rigid script. And for Raphael, who had spent the first half of his adult life obsessed with control and predictability, there was an exhilarating freedom in this uncertainty, a newfound confidence in the ability to adapt, to find solutions, to turn challenges into opportunities. The triplets soon joined them, their faces lit up by the combination of excitement for the adventure beginning and a hint of nostalgia for the familiar security they left behind. "What if we miss home?" Sophia asked, her sensitivity always on edge. "We will," Camilla replied honestly, hugging her daughter, "and that's okay. Missing home is the price we pay for having a place to love." "Besides," Raphael added, bending down to his children's level, "home isn't just a place, it's where we are together. This boat will be our home for a while, and then we'll return to Newport with so many stories to tell that we'll need weeks." The triplets nodded, comforted by the explanation. Peter, ever pragmatic, pointed to the horizon. "Where are we going first, Daddy?" Raphael exchanged a look with Camilla, both smiling with that complicity developed over the years. "First, Cape Cod," he replied. "Then Mystic, Block Island, Boston, Miami, and then we'll head north, visiting all the gems of the U.S. coast, up to the Florida Keys," Matthew asked, remembering the stories he had heard about the paradisiacal archipelago. "Especially the Florida Keys," Camilla confirmed. "But the destination isn't always the most important thing on a journey like this. It's what we discover along the way, the people we meet, the experiences we share." "Like a great adventure," Sophia exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "Exactly like a great adventure," Raphael agreed. "The biggest one we've ever had together." The children were soon drawn to Captain Ernest, who began teaching them the names of the sailboat's parts, the basic functions of each rope and sail, the first steps of what would be a year of constant learning. Raphael and Camilla remained on deck, watching their children eagerly absorb the new information, their young minds like sponges for knowledge. "Already regretting it?" Raphael asked softly, a playful smile on his lips. "Not for a second," Camilla replied with conviction. "And you?" "Never," he confirmed. "This is exactly the life we chose. Not the easiest, nor the most predictable, nor the most conventional, but definitely the most ours." Camilla smiled, resting her head on his shoulder as they watched the infinite blue horizon before them, the Newport coast, now just a distant line behind them. "Remember the choice you made?" she asked softly. "Between the Empire and a real life?" "I remember every moment," Raphael replied, his eyes fixed on the triplets who were now laughing as Captain Ernest told a seemingly hilarious story. "It was the only choice that truly mattered." "And now here we are," Camilla murmured, "with 3 amazing children on a sailboat, setting off to explore the world." "Definitely a real life," Raphael completed. "So it's the most real we could have chosen." The 3 stars sailed steadily, its white sails filled by the constant wind, the sun shining in the cloudless sky. Ahead, an ocean of possibilities, discoveries, adventures. Behind, a life built with love, courageous choices and redefined priorities. And at the center of it all, a family, not perfect, not without challenges, but founded on something Raphael had taken almost a lifetime to discover. That true success is not measured in skyscrapers or bank accounts, but in shared moments, sincere laughter, and the courage to choose, every day, what truly matters. The first days at sea established a new routine for the Sterling family. Mornings began early, with the sunrise over the ocean, a spectacle that never lost its power to amaze, even with daily repetition. The triplets awoke with their usual energy, eager for every new discovery the day might bring. Mornings were dedicated to studies with Bianca, transforming the main saloon of the sailboat into an improvised classroom. But this was an education different from anything the children had experienced. Mathematics applied to navigation. Biology studied through direct observations of marine life. Geography experienced in real time. "Where are we now, exactly?" Bianca asked. As the triplets leaned over nautical charts spread on the table, Peter, seen always the most analytical, examined the navigation instruments and compared them with the coordinates on the map. "Approximately here," he pointed, with surprising precision for a 6-year-old, "between Mystic and Block Island." "Excellent," the teacher praised. "And what are the geographical characteristics of this region?" "Indented coastline. Many islands, calm waters protected by the bay's formation," Sophia replied promptly, her memory for details always impressive. "And lots of dolphins," Matthew added enthusiastically, less interested in formal geography and more in the living creatures they might encounter. Afternoons were dedicated to practical experiences, learning to navigate with Captain Ernest, exploring small islands and coves where they anchored, swimming in crystal-clear waters, identifying fish and seabirds. Raphael often led small snorkeling expeditions, teaching his children about the marine ecosystems that had so fascinated him since he started his ecological tourism company. Camilla used stops in small coastal towns to study local architecture, often taking the children with her, explaining how constructions adapted to the environment, how different cultures developed unique solutions to similar challenges. Evenings were for stories around the dinner table, board games lit by LED lanterns, and occasionally, when the sky was particularly clear, impromptu astronomy lessons on deck, identifying constellations in the light, pollution-free sky. Charles stayed with them for 2 weeks, until their arrival in Miami, marveling at the transformation of his former boss and friend. "You know what's most impressive?" he commented to Camilla the night before his departure, watching Raphael patiently teach the triplets to identify different types of marine knots. "It's not just that he changed, it's that he seems complete, as if he finally found exactly where he was meant to be." Camilla nodded, perfectly understanding what Charles meant. The Raphael she had known years ago, brilliant, focused, relentlessly ambitious, always seemed to be searching for something, even at the height of his corporate success, as if there was an emptiness that no professional achievement could fill. "He found his purpose," she replied simply. "Or perhaps he always knew what it was. He just didn't have the courage to acknowledge it." When Charles returned to New York City, the family continued their journey, now completely adapted to life at sea. Challenges were not lacking, occasional storms that tested their courage, equipment that needed maintenance at inconvenient times, inevitable conflicts when 5 people share a limited space for prolonged periods. But for every challenge, there were a dozen sublime moments: the majestic leap of a humpback whale near the sailboat, eliciting gasps of astonishment and joy from the triplets, the sparkle of bioluminescent waters on moonless nights, the sunset seen from a deserted beach where they were the only inhabitants, the sense of mastery when the triplets performed their first navigation maneuver without adult assistance. Each stop along the U.S. coast brought new experiences, new connections. In New Orleans, they participated in a traditional fisherman's festival, with the triplets quickly learning the steps of local dances. In Charleston, South Carolina, they collaborated on a sea turtle conservation project, helping release newborn hatchlings into the sea. In Savannah, Georgia, they explored the coral reefs that gave the city its name, marveling at the diversity of life inhabiting those fragile ecosystems. Raphael expanded his ecological tourism business, establishing partnerships with local operators committed to sustainable practices. Camilla advanced her architectural projects, often incorporating elements inspired by the building traditions she discovered along the journey. But most notable was the growth of the triplets, not just physical, although it was visible how they gained height and dexterity, their bodies strengthened by an active and healthy life. It was the development of their personalities, their confidence, their understanding of the world. Sophia, always the most empathetic, developed a keen sensitivity to different cultures, absorbing languages, customs, and stories with impressive ease. In every port, she made friends with surprising speed, overcoming language barriers with her genuine curiosity and warm smile. Peter, the observer, meticulously documented the journey in a detailed journal, combining scientific notes with surprisingly profound reflections for someone so young. His understanding of navigation quickly approached Captain Ernest's level, who often commented that the boy was born for the sea. Matthew, eternally in motion, transformed the sailboat into his personal playground, developing an agility that sometimes alarmed his parents, but always impressed any observer. He was invariably the first to volunteer for any physical task, from hoisting sails to exploring coastal caves. On quiet nights, when the triplets finally fell asleep, exhausted from another day of adventures, Raphael and Camilla frequently found themselves on deck, sharing a glass of wine under the stars, reflecting on the journey, not just the physical one along the U.S. coast, but the broader journey of their lives. "Would you have imagined this?" Raphael asked on one of those nights, as they sailed through the calm waters near the Florida Keys, their final destination before beginning their return south. "When we met, during that headquarters building project, that one day we would be here." Camilla smiled, remembering her first impression of him. Arrogant, inflexible, intimidating in his impeccable suit and with his impossible demands. "Never," she admitted honestly. "You were the last man in the world I would imagine living on a sailboat, prioritizing experiences over possessions, choosing freedom over control." Raphael laughed, acknowledging the truth in her observation. "And you?" he asked. "Did you imagine that the stubborn architect who challenged me in every project meeting would end up being the mother of my children, my partner in this life that I myself had not even imagined?" 10 years had passed since the great journey on the Foe 3 Stars, transforming the 6-year-old triplets into 16-year-olds, each of them developing in distinct directions, yet united by the special bond that only multiples share. Sophia, with her long dark hair and expressive eyes so similar to Camilla's, had become a young woman of keen artistic sensibility. Her talent for storytelling had evolved into a passion for cinema and documentaries, with a special focus on socio-environmental issues. Her most recent project, a short film about traditional fishing communities threatened by predatory industrial fishing, had been selected for an international student festival. Peter E., always the most analytical and observant of the three, had channeled his childhood curiosity into a serious dedication to marine sciences. At 16, he was already participating in research projects in partnership with universities, specializing in the study of coral reefs and their crucial role in ocean ecosystems. His childhood reading glasses had been replaced by a more sober model, which lent his young face a premature seriousness that often made Raphael smile, recognizing traits of his own past. Matthew, Chase for his part, remained true to his physical and adventurous nature. He had become a talented athlete, excelling particularly in water sports. His passion for the sea manifested itself differently from his siblings, less intellectual, more visceral, more connected to the pure joy of gliding over waves on a surfboard or exploring depths with increasingly advanced diving equipment. For Raphael and Camilla, now 48 and 45 respectively, observing their children's development was a constant source of wonder, pride, and, occasionally, nostalgia. It seemed impossible that those small beings who once fit in their arms were now on the cusp of adulthood, forming identities, making choices, considering futures. The Sterling family remained based in Newport, though the concept of home had remained flexible over the years. The triplets' unconventional education had evolved into a model that combined periods in a local progressive school with independent projects and frequent educational trips. The 3 Stars, faithfully maintained and occasionally updated, remained an important extension of their home, a mobile refuge that took them on regular adventures, now usually sailed by the triplets themselves, under increasingly distant supervision from their parents. Raphael's company, Ocean Life, had grown significantly, transforming into an organization nationally recognized for its commitment to sustainable tourism and environmental education. Although he still maintained strategic control, he had delegated daily management to a competent team, allowing him to dedicate more time to personal projects, including consulting for marine conservation policies at a governmental level. Camilla, in turn, had established a respected name in sustainable architecture, with projects across the United States and occasionally in other Latin American countries. Her office in Newport, though small, had become a hub for innovation in ecological design, frequently hosting interns and researchers interested in her approach that harmonized aesthetics, functionality, and environmental respect. The life they had built together, so different from what either of them had initially imagined, had become a reference for many in their circle. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers occasionally commented on the courage of their choices, the authenticity of their lifestyle, the evident harmony in their family. But as in any real story, not everything was perfect. The triplets' adolescence had brought inevitable challenges, questioning authority, seeking independence, occasional conflicts over boundaries and expectations. And for Raphael and Camilla, there were also more personal questions: the continuous balance between careers and family, the redefinition of their relationship as their children needed them less, and occasionally the silent doubt if they had really made all the right decisions along the way. On a Sunday afternoon, the family gathered for a late lunch on the porch of their seaside home. It was a tradition they kept religiously, even during the busiest periods, a time to reconnect, share news, and stay updated on each other's increasingly independent lives. "So, how are the preparations for the festival going?" Raphael asked Sophia, as he served a second helping of salad. His daughter, who had been focused on her cell phone, looked up with an enthusiastic smile. "Almost done. I finished the final edit last night, and Mark is finalizing the sound mix today." Mark, a music production student 2 years older, was a frequent collaborator on Sophia's projects and, Raphael suspected, something more than just a colleague. "If all goes well, we'll send the definitive version tomorrow, well before the deadline." "Do you need any help?" Camilla offered. "I can review it before the final submission, if you like." Sophia considered the offer for a moment, then nodded. "That would be great, Mom. Your eye for detail is amazing." She paused. "And it would be cool if you two could watch it before we send it." For feedback, Raphael and Camilla exchanged surprised glances. Sophia, like many teenagers, had become increasingly reserved about her creative work, preferring to share it only when it was already finalized and approved by her peers. The request for pre-submission feedback was a rare display of vulnerability. "We'd be honored," Raphael replied sincerely. The conversation shifted to Peter, who was unusually silent, pushing his food around with little interest. "Everything all right, son?" Camilla asked, noticing his behavior. Peter adjusted his glasses, a nervous gesture that had persisted since childhood. "I received an email this morning," he finally said, "from the University of Miami, about the Marine Research Summer Program." "And," Raphael encouraged, when his son paused, "I was accepted," he announced, a small smile finally appearing. With a full scholarship, there was an explosion of congratulations from the family. The program was highly competitive, accepting only 20 international students each year to work alongside renowned researchers on advanced marine conservation projects. "Why didn't you tell us right away?" Matthew asked, lightly punching his brother's shoulder. "That's incredible," Peter shrugged, his smile gradually widening. "I wanted to make sure it wasn't a mistake. I checked the email 3 times to confirm my name was actually there." "Of course it is," Raphael commented. "Proud. Your work on the Abrolhos Reef certainly impressed the committee." Peter had dedicated the last 2 summers to an independent project meticulously documenting changes in a specific segment of the Abrolhos Marine National Park. His combination of scientific rigor and genuine passion for the subject apparently had caught the right attention. "It means I'll be away for 3 months, Peter added, his tone now revealing a concern. "From June to August. It's the longest I'll be away." Away from his family, away from the siblings with whom he had shared every day since birth. It was a significant step for any teenager, but especially for a triplet. "We'll be here when you get back," Sophia said. surprising everyone with the gentleness in her voice. Normally, she was the one who teased her brother most for his excessive caution. "And you can text us every day. In fact, we'll demand pictures of all the strange fish you find. And videos of any shark that swims by," Matthew added enthusiastically. Peter smiled, visibly relaxing with his siblings' support. "Speaking of being away," Matthew interjected, seizing the moment, "I also have an announcement." Everyone turned to him, curious. Matthew, though brilliant in his own way, tended to be more carefree about academic and professional matters than his siblings. "I received an invitation to participate in the Sustainable Youth Surf Circuit," he revealed, his eyes shining with excitement. "The one Kai's company sponsors." Raphael knew the circuit well, an innovative competition that combined athletic excellence with environmental awareness, requiring participants not only to compete on waves, but also to get involved in beach cleanup and community education projects at each stop. "That's a great honor, Matthew," he said, genuinely impressed. "The selection is extremely rigorous. Not just for surfing skills," Camilla added, equally proud, "but for the environmental commitment you've shown." Matthew, often overshadowed by his siblings in terms of academic recognition, seemed almost embarrassed by the praise. "I guess it helped growing up in a family where the ocean is practically another member," he joked, trying to downplay the moment. "When does it start?" Peter asked, already calculating mentally. "July Bambues," Matthew replied. "First in the US, then stages in Peru, Chile, and finally Costa Rica. It ends in September." "So you and Peter will be away at the same time," Sophia commented, a note of melancholy in her voice that did not go unnoticed by Camilla. "And you, Sophia?" her mother asked gently. "Any plans for the summer besides the festival?" The young woman shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Nothing so impressive," she replied. "I'm going to help Mark with a documentary about plastic pollution and maybe take an advanced editing intensive online course." Raphael and Camilla exchanged worried glances. Although each triplet had always shown different interests, there was a natural synchronicity in their developmental rhythms. It was the first time they would follow such clearly divergent paths, especially for a prolonged period. "You know what we should do," Raphael suggested after a moment. "A trip on the 3 stars before you two leave. The 5 of us together, like in the old days, the triplets, faces lit up almost simultaneously. Despite all the teenage quest for independence, family adventures on the sailboat remained a special point of connection. We could go to the Florida Keys," Peter suggested immediately, "revisit where we did the turtle conservation project when we were little. Or explore new places," Matthew countered. "There are islands in the north we've never properly visited." "And I could document everything," Sophia added, her enthusiasm visibly growing. "Make a film about our family, our history with the ocean. Something personal, but with an environmental message too." The excitement was contagious, ideas flowing quickly, plans being sketched out. For a moment, the years seemed to roll back. The triplets were no longer teenagers on the verge of independence, but those 6-year-olds marveling at every new discovery during the great journey. After lunch, while the triplets dispersed for their activities, Sophia to finalize her film with Mark, Peter for a video call with his future mentor in Miami, Matthew for a surf session with friends, Raphael and Camilla remained on the porch, savoring coffee and the momentary tranquility. "It will be difficult, won't it?" Camilla commented, looking out at the sea. "Watching them leave, follow separate paths." Raphael nodded, perfectly understanding the bittersweet feeling. "It's what we always wanted for them," he replied. "Independence, confidence to explore the world, courage to follow their passions." "I know," Camilla smiled faintly. "And I'm genuinely happy for them, proud of what they've become. Just hurts a little too," Raphael completed, taking her hand across the table. "Seeing time pass, realizing that magical phase of childhood is definitely over." They fell silent for a few moments, each lost in their own reflections. It wasn't just about the triplets growing up, it was also about themselves, about how their roles were changing, about what would come next. "Perhaps we should also think about what we want for ourselves," Camilla finally suggested, "when the triplets really leave home for university in a year or 2. It was a conversation they had postponed, though both knew it would eventually need to happen. So focused were they on raising their children, on building this unique family lifestyle that they rarely talked about what they would do when that chapter began to close. "I've been thinking about it," Raphael admitted. "About new projects, new directions." "Like what?" Camilla asked, genuinely curious. She knew her husband well now, his constant need for purpose, to feel he was contributing in a meaningful way. Raphael hesitated, as if testing the idea aloud for the first time. "I've been considering transforming ocean life into a full educational foundation," he revealed. "So not just tourist expeditions or occasional school programs, but a permanent center for marine research and environmental education. Something that can truly impact public policy, influence the next generation." Camilla smiled, not surprised. It was a natural evolution of the path Raphael had been on in recent years, increasingly focused on the educational and conservationist aspects of his company. "It sounds perfect for you," she commented sincerely. "Joyson, and for the legacy you want to leave." "And you?" Raphael asked. "Any specific dream for this next phase?" Camilla looked at the horizon, considering the question carefully. "I want to design truly innovative housing," she finally replied. "Not just sustainable in the conventional sense, but revolutionary in how it integrates people, communities, and nature." She paused, organizing thoughts she had been quietly cultivating. "I've already started some research on advanced bioarchitecture, regenerative materials, circular community systems." Raphael studied her, admiring the passion that still shone in her eyes when she spoke of her professional dreams. After so many years, he was still surprised by the depth of her thought, by her integrative vision that connected aesthetics, functionality, sustainability, and human well-being. "We could combine our projects somehow," he suggested. "Way to the educational center could incorporate prototypes of your innovative housing." Camilla's eyes lit up with the possibility. "A demonstration campus," she elaborated, her mind already visualizing possibilities, where people could not only learn about marine conservation, but concretely experience alternative ways of living in harmony with nature. The conversation flowed naturally into details, ideas, possibilities, the kind of creative exchange that had always been one of the pillars of their relationship. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Raphael felt a wave of gratitude for the woman beside him. 20 years had passed since that crucial moment in the Newport hospital, when he discovered the existence of the triplets and made the choice that had completely redefined his life. 20 years of joint growth, adaptations, discoveries, occasional conflicts, and constant reconciliations. And here they were, still dreaming together, still building, still evolving. "What are you thinking about?" Camilla asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Raphael smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "How lucky I was," he replied simply. "How that letter intercepted by my father, which at the time seemed like a tragedy, ended up being the beginning of everything that truly matters." Camilla nodded, perfectly understanding. It was a reflection they had shared many times over the years, how seemingly disastrous events can eventually turn out to be blessings in disguise, how pain can be the catalyst for necessary transformations. "The triplets don't know how much they are products of that transformation," she commented thoughtfully. "Not just biologically, but in essence. Especially you." She looked directly into Raphael's eyes. "How they never knew the man you were before, only the man you chose to become." It was true. The triplets grew up with the transformed Raphael, the present, patient, emotionally available father, passionate about causes that transcended personal gain. They never knew the cold, calculating executive, the ruthless heir molded by Augustus Sterling to perpetuate an empire. "Sometimes I wonder what my father would think," Raphael admitted, "if he could see all this. The almost adult triplets, the life we built, the choices we made. Augustus Sterling had passed away long ago, when the triplets were still too young to truly remember him." Over the years, Raphael and Camilla had shared stories about the patriarch, not just the difficult ones, about manipulation and control, but also about his eventual change at the end of his life, his regret, his belated recognition of other ways of living. "I think, in the end, he would understand it," Camilla replied softly. perhaps even approve in his own way. After all, you built a different kind of legacy, but a powerful legacy nonetheless. Raphael nodded, grateful for her perspective. It was true. Although he had rejected the traditional corporate path, he had built something significant, something with lasting impact, not in the form of skyscrapers or billion-dollar mergers, but in transformed lives, expanded consciousness, a piece of the planet a little better protected. The sun finally disappeared below the horizon, the sky transitioning to shades of purple and deep blue. The first stars began to dot the firmament, including the one that, according to the family mythology started by Sophia many years ago, was where Augustus Sterling had transformed into light. Raphael and Camilla remained on the porch until complete nightfall, planning the family trip on the 3 stars, discussing details of their future projects, occasionally falling into comfortable silences that only truly connected couples can share without discomfort. When they finally went inside, they found the triplets gathered in the living room, an increasingly rare occurrence now that each had distinct interests and their own social circles. Sophia was showing something on her laptop, probably excerpts from her documentary, while Peter and Matthew watched with genuine interest, occasionally offering comments that their sister noted seriously. Raphael and Camilla stopped at the entrance, observing without interrupting. There was something deeply comforting in seeing that, despite growing differences, the bond between the 3 remained intact, that they could disagree, follow separate paths, develop distinct personalities, and still support each other, understand each other on a level no one else reached. "Are you 2 going to stand there all night?" Matthew asked, noticing them first. "Come see what Sophia's doing. It's amazing." Invited into the circle, Raphael and Camilla joined their children, quickly absorbed in the shared excitement. For a few hours, worries about imminent separations, life transitions, and uncertain futures were temporarily suspended, replaced by the simple joy of being together, sharing ideas, being a family. And as the night deepened, Raphael thought that of all the lessons he had learned on his extraordinary journey from corporate heir to father and environmental educator, perhaps the most valuable was this: that true wealth is not in what you own or control, but in what you choose to value, in the moments you prioritize, in the connections you nurture, that in the end, the choice between an empire and a real life was never really about losing or gaining, but about discovering what truly constitutes a life well lived, an authentic life, aligned with genuine values, connected to what truly matters. And that night, surrounded by his family, enveloped in the laughter and enthusiasm of the triplets, in the silent understanding shared with Camilla, Raphael Sterling knew with absolute certainty that he had chosen correctly, that all the riches of his abandoned empire could never compare to the treasure he had found in this deliberately chosen, patiently built, deeply valued life, a real life in all its imperfect complexity and extraordinary beauty. In the weeks leading up to the planned voyage on the 3 stars, the Sterling home transformed into a whirlwind of activity. The triplets, though theoretically supposed to be focused on final studies before summer vacation, seemed constantly dispersed between preparations for their respective future adventures and enthusiastic planning for the family expedition. Sophia practically lived in her small, improvised editing studio, finalizing her documentary for the festival, while simultaneously researching potential locations for the project she planned to film during the family trip. Peter alternated between video calls with his future mentors in Miami and the meticulous organization of scientific equipment he intended to bring to record data in specific areas during the expedition. Matthew, seemingly the least systematic of the 3, actually dedicated hours to checking the sailboat's conditions, planning alternative routes based on wind conditions, and consulting long-term weather forecasts. Raphael and Camilla, observing their children's excitement, felt a mixture of nostalgia and admiration. It was impossible not to compare these competent and focused almost adults with the small children they once had to teach to tie their own shoelaces. "They really don't need us anymore, do they?" Camilla commented one night, after observing Peter independently calculate complex adjustments to the navigation route they had planned. "For some things, no," Raphael agreed. "But I suspect they'll need us in different ways for the next 50 years or more." It was a thought both comforting and soberly realistic, the recognition that their role as parents had evolved, but not ended. That needs changed in nature, but did not completely disappear. The day of departure finally arrived, a clear May morning, with a perfect breeze and cooperative sea, as if the elements recognized the importance of the journey. The 3 stars, meticulously maintained over the years, gleamed under the morning sun, its white sails ready to be unfurled. "It's strange," Peter commented, as they loaded the last supplies aboard. "That same amount of food used to last weeks. Now, with 3 teenagers, we'll probably need to resupply in a few days. Especially with you eating for 2 lately," Matthew teased, referring to his brother's recent growth spurt, who was now the tallest of the 3 by a few inches. "Says the guy who emptied the fridge after the regional championship last week," Sophia retorted, defending Peter while simultaneously filming the interaction. Raphael and Camilla exchanged smiles, accustomed to the triplets' dynamic, constant teasing on the surface, fierce loyalty in the deeper layers. Captain Ernest, now almost 70, but still surprisingly vigorous, had come for a brief visit before departure. Although he no longer sailed regularly with the family, he remained an important presence, especially at significant moments. "Guess what, Ernest?" Peter commented enthusiastically. "I'm going to follow the route you taught me to pass through that narrow channel near Mystic. Just be careful with the currents on the full moon," the old sailor replied, pleased to see his knowledge being passed on to the next generation. "They can be treacherous even for experienced navigators." While the others finalized preparations, Raphael found a moment to speak privately with the old captain, who had become a close friend over the years. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything you taught them, all of us." Ernest smiled, the wrinkles on his tanned face deepening with the gesture. "You know what's most gratifying for an old sailor like me," he replied, "to see an entire family develop not only sailing skills, but a true love for the sea, respect for its strength, appreciation for its beauty, understanding of its importance." He looked at the triplets, each engaged in their activity. Sophia filming, Peter checking navigation instruments, Matthew adjusting the sails. "They are exceptional," he commented, "not just technically competent, but connected, tuned into the ocean in a way that many take a lifetime to develop, if they ever do." Raphael nodded, recognizing the truth in the observation. The triplets had grown up not just near the sea, but in constant dialogue with it, learning its languages, respecting its rhythms, understanding its cycles. It was a relationship that transcended hobby or even passion. It was a fundamental element of their identities. After the final goodbyes, the family boarded and began the journey. For the first time, Peter took initial command as captain, with Raphael as a consultant, no longer as leader. It was a symbolic but significant transition. The explicit recognition that roles were shifting, that the new generation was gradually assuming responsibilities previously exclusively held by the parents. The first days at sea flowed with a harmony that surprised everyone. Despite the triplets' increasingly defined personalities, the occasional tensions typical of adolescence, there was a shared rhythm that seemed to activate automatically when they were on the 3 stars, as if the sailboat were an instrument they knew so intimately that they could play it together without needing sheet music. The planned route was ambitious, heading down the coast from Boston to Mystic Key, then exploring less visited islands in the region before continuing south, eventually reaching the coast of San Diego, where they would visit marine conservation areas that Peter particularly wanted to document before his departure for Miami. Evenings were special, shared dinners on deck under the stars, competitive board games that often ended in laughter, and most precious, conversations. Real, deep conversations. The kind that rarely happened in daily routines, with their multiple distractions and competing agendas. "What worries you most?" Camilla asked one night, as they shared an improvised dessert after a particularly gratifying day exploring a deserted island. The question was simple, but rarely posed so directly. The triplets exchanged glances, as if silently deciding who would answer first. "That my choices won't make a real difference," Sophia finally said. "That I'll make films, tell stories, try to raise awareness. And in the end, the ocean keeps dying. Communities keep being destroyed. Nothing really changes. The raw honesty of the answer created a moment of reflective silence. For me, it's not being able to balance scientific rigor with practical application, Peter added, his voice softer than usual. I'm afraid of getting so lost in the data, the methodologies, the research, that I forget why I started. That I forget the ultimate goal is to protect real ecosystems, not just publish papers. Raphael watched his son with a mixture of surprise and recognition. It was a surprisingly mature concern, and strangely familiar, though in a completely different context. He himself had struggled with similar tensions between abstraction and application, HR theory and practice. Everyone turned to Matthew, normally the least inclined to share insecurities. I'm afraid of disappointing you all, he confessed, surprising everyone. And Sophia with her award-winning films, Peter probably destined to discover some new marine species, and me, surfing waves. He shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant but clearly vulnerable. Sometimes it feels like I'm not truly contributing. Camilla immediately reached out, touching her son's arm. Matthew, you make us proud every day, she said firmly. Not just for your athletic talent, but for your genuine connection to the ocean, for your ability to inspire others through example, for your dedication to making water sports more accessible for young people in disadvantaged communities. Exactly, Raphael agreed. Different people contribute in different ways. The world needs scientists like Peter, storytellers like Sophia, and passionate ambassadors like you. It's not a competition. It's a collaboration. The siblings exchanged meaningful glances, and Sophia surprisingly put an arm around Matthew's shoulders. Besides, you're the only one of us who truly understands the ocean viscerally, she commented. I study it through stories, Peter through data, but you feel it directly. That has a value none of us can replicate. The moment of shared vulnerability created an almost palpable connection between the five. Raphael and Camilla then also shared their own concerns. Raphael about finding the right balance between delegating responsibilities and remaining involved in his evolving organization. Camilla about the challenge of constantly reinventing her architectural approach in a rapidly changing world. As the conversation continued, Raphael observed with admiration how the triplets offered surprisingly mature perspectives on their parents' concerns, as if, in some aspects, roles were temporarily reversed. Sophia suggesting that the educational foundation Raphael planned could incorporate a mentorship program for young environmental leaders. Peter proposing that Camilla consider documenting her design methods in an accessible format for architecture students in developing countries. Matthew simply stating, with his characteristic honesty, that they both should relax and realize they've already made more positive difference than most people ever will. The journey continued, alternating between moments of active exploration, dives in stunning reefs, visits to traditional fishing communities, impromptu scientific research in unique microenvironments, and periods of calm sailing when the infinite blue horizon seemed to invite contemplation and connection. It was during one of these sailing periods, approximately halfway through the expedition, that Raphael found Sophia alone at the bow at dawn, filming the sunrise with intense concentration. "Early bird," he commented softly, so as not to startle her. His daughter smiled without taking her eyes off the camera. "The light is perfect now. Couldn't miss it." Raphael watched her work for a few moments, admiring her technique, her patience, her attention to detail. It was fascinating how Sophia, in many respects similar to Camilla in appearance and sensibility, had developed her own unique form of expression, not through architecture, but through moving images, visual storytelling. When she finally finished capturing the sequence, Sophia lowered the camera and turned to her father. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Anything," Raphael replied, intrigued by the change. "Did you really never miss it?" she asked. "Your old life, the power, the status, the unlimited resources." The question caught him off guard. Although the triplets knew the family history, the separation, the intercepted letter, Raphael's subsequent transformation, they rarely directly questioned emotional aspects of the big change in his life. "Yes, I did," he replied honestly, after a moment of reflection. "In the first few years, There were moments when I faced financial limitations I had never experienced before. Moments when I saw former colleagues on the covers of business magazines, expanding global empires, and I wondered, what if? He paused, looking at the horizon where the sun was now fully emerging, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. But they were just moments, he continued, never genuine doubts. Because even on the most challenging days of this life I chose, there was an authenticity, an internal congruence that I never experienced in that previous existence. Sophia watched him intently, absorbing every word. It's like I was living a borrowed life before, Raphael tried to explain. Following a script written by my father, playing a character who wasn't really me. There was external success, certainly, recognition, material rewards, but internally, a constant emptiness. And now? Sophia asked, her voice almost a whisper. Raphael smiled, realizing she was genuinely trying to understand, not just out of curiosity, but perhaps for some unarticulated personal question. Now there's alignment, he replied simply, between who I am internally and how I live externally, between my values and my actions, between what I believe and what I build. And that alignment brings a peace that no conventional success ever provided. Sophia nodded slowly, as if deeply processing the answer. I'm struggling with something similar, she finally confessed. I received an offer to intern at a big production studio after the festival. It would be an incredible professional opportunity, but, Raphael encouraged, when she hesitated, but their projects are mainly commercial, blockbusters, advertising for big corporations, superficial content designed to maximize views. She paused, clearly conflicted. It would be a huge boost to my career, valuable contacts, exceptional technical learning, but I feel like I'd be compromising the purpose that made me choose cinema in the first place. Raphael recognized the dilemma immediately, the eternal conflict between professional advancement and personal integrity, between pragmatism and purpose. The same kind of choice he had faced, though in dramatically different circumstances. I'm not saying the opportunity at the studio would necessarily be negative, Raphael clarified. Just that important choices are rarely between right and wrong, but between different versions of who we could become, and the fundamental question might be, which version of Sophia do you want to find looking back in the mirror in 10 years? The question hung between them, profound in its simplicity. Sophia did not answer immediately, but Raphael sensed that his words had touched something significant. He offered no further advice, respecting the space his daughter clearly needed to process her own thoughts. They stood side by side in friendly silence, watching the sun fully ascend, the new day unfolding into infinite possibilities. Eventually, the rest of the family began to wake, the morning's tranquility gradually replaced by the familiar energy of 5 people sharing a limited space. As the journey continued, Raphael carefully observed the triplets, noticing small but significant evolutions. Peter, usually so cautious and analytical, surprisingly proposed exploring a technically challenging underwater cave system, demonstrating a new willingness for calculated risks. Matthew, often impulsive, showed impressive patience in teaching basic diving techniques to a group of children in a fishing community where they briefly docked. Sophia, a few days after her conversation with Raphael, calmly announced during dinner that she had decided to decline the internship at the big studio, opting instead for a less prestigious but more aligned opportunity with her passions, a collaborative environmental documentary project with indigenous communities. For Raphael and Camilla, there was a deep pleasure in witnessing these small transformations, not just their children's physical growth or skill development, but the gradual crystallization of their internal moral compasses, their abilities to make decisions based on authentic values, not just on conventions or external expectations. As the expedition neared its end, a bittersweet feeling permeated the family's interactions. Everyone knew this would be the last great joint adventure before Peter and Matthew left for their respective commitments, beginning a new chapter of increasing independence. On the penultimate night, anchored in a protected bay near San Diego, Sophia surprised everyone after dinner. "I have something to show you," she announced, connecting her laptop to a small portable screen they had brought. It's a personal project I've been working on during this trip. It's not completely finished, but... She adjusted the equipment and started playback. On the screen, images of the family over the years appeared, starting with old photographs of the triplets as babies in the seaside house, progressing chronologically through key moments of their lives. The first big trip on the 3 Stars when they were 6. Birthdays celebrated on various beaches. School projects, sports competitions, scientific discoveries. Sophia had skillfully interwoven this archive material with footage captured during the current trip, contrasting the triplets as children with their teenage versions, often recreating specific scenes in identical locations, demonstrating simultaneously how much they had changed and how much they essentially remained the same. Even more surprising were the individual interviews Sophia had apparently secretly conducted with each family member during the trip, capturing deeply personal reflections on growth, connection, identity, and the special relationship they all shared with the ocean. As the film progressed, Raphael felt a lump in his throat. What Sophia had created was not just a family documentary, it was a visual meditation on time, transformation, and the invisible bonds that keep a family connected even when individual paths diverge. The final sequence showed the 5 Sterlings at the bow of the 3 Stars at sunset, filmed from a distance by a camera Sophia had apparently discreetly installed. There were no dialogues, just the silent image of the family watching the horizon together, the sun gradually setting, the sky transforming into a natural work of art, the sailboat sailing steadily through waters that reflected all the magnificence above. When the screen darkened and the simple credits appeared, Sailing Together, a film by Sophia Sterling, there was a moment of absolute silence. Raphael noticed he wasn't the only one with moist eyes. Even Matthew, normally so determined to maintain a facade of teenage nonchalance, discreetly wiped away a tear. "Sophia," Camilla was the first to speak, her voice choked with emotion. "That was extraordinary, truly impressive," Peter added, adjusting his glasses as he always did when emotional. "The narrative structure, the thematic progression, but most importantly, the authenticity. You captured something real." "It's the best film I've ever seen," Matthew declared with his direct honesty. "And I'm not just saying that because we're in it." Sophia absorbed the compliments with a characteristic mix of pride and shyness. "I wanted to create something we could take with us," she explained. "Something that would remind all of us, especially when we're apart in the coming months, that what we built together never truly disappears, even when we're not physically in the same place." Raphael felt his chest tighten with the profound meaning behind the project. It was Sophia's mature recognition that a phase was ending, that the constant physical unity that had defined their family for 16 years would inevitably change. But it was also a powerful affirmation that the bonds formed, the experiences shared, the intertwined identities would remain. "This is your best work yet," he finally said, finding his voice. "Not just technically, but emotionally. You managed to capture something intangible, something many try but few truly succeed at, the essence of a family." Sophia smiled, visibly moved by the recognition. "I'll make copies for each of us," she promised. "So Peter can take it to Miami, Matthew to the surf circuit, and you two to, well, wherever the next chapters take you." The implicit mention of Raphael and Camilla's still undefined futures briefly hung in the air, a gentle reminder that it wasn't just the triplets facing transitions and new possibilities. The family remained on deck late that night, conversations flowing naturally between reminiscences of the past, reflections on the present, and speculations about the future. There was an almost sacred quality to the interaction, as if everyone intuitively perceived the rarity and preciousness of these moments of complete connection, these perfect intervals when time seems simultaneously frozen and infinite. On the last day of the expedition, sailing back to Newport, Raphael found a moment of tranquility at the stern of the sailboat. He watched the triplets at the bow, Sophia adjusting her camera for a final shot, Peter checking coordinates on his tablet, Matthew simply absorbing the wind and sea spray with his face uplifted in pure appreciation. Camilla joined him silently, sliding her hand into his with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had shared half a life together. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Raphael considered the question, his eyes still fixed on his children. "Cycles," he finally replied. "How life moves in ascending spirals, not circles. We return to similar points, but never exactly the same. Always a level up, or at least different." Camilla followed his gaze, understanding instantly. "They're on the threshold now," she commented, "as we were 20 years ago, making choices that will define trajectories, that will create possibilities, that will close certain doors while opening others. The difference is, they have a more solid foundation," Raphael observed, "more internal clarity, more alignment with their authentic values, less need to learn through traumatic ruptures or losses." It was a reflection that often comforted him, the perception that, despite all the imperfections and uncertainties of parenthood, they had managed to provide the triplets with something he himself had not had: the freedom and support to discover their own genuine paths early on, without the weight of crushing expectations or predetermined legacies. "Can you imagine," Camilla asked after a few moments, "if your father hadn't intercepted my letter, if we had stayed together without that separation? What would our lives be like? What would they be like?" It was a speculation that occasionally arose between them over the years, the exercise of imagining alternative realities, paths not taken, different outcomes from crucial moments. "We'd probably still be together," Raphael replied, allowing himself the imaginative exercise. "But I'd possibly still be CEO of the Sterling conglomerate, trying to balance board meetings with the triplets and school events, physically present, but often mentally absent. And I'd have to constantly fight to keep our family life protected from that corporate world," Camilla added, "to ensure that the values we consider important weren't completely submerged by the demands of the empire." "The triplets would have unlimited material privileges," Raphael continued. "The best schools, international travel, powerful social connections, but perhaps less freedom to discover their own passions, less exposure to different realities, less understanding of what truly matters beyond conventional success." It was impossible to know for sure, of course. Perhaps Raphael would have eventually found balance and purpose even while maintaining his corporate position. Perhaps the triplets would have developed the same essential qualities, even raised in an environment of extreme wealth and privilege. Perhaps Camilla would have managed to counterbalance the potentially negative influences of that world. But observing the young adults his children had become, confident but not arrogant, ambitious but guided by purpose, aware of their privileges even relative, Raphael could not avoid the conviction that, however painful the process had been, the final result was precisely what it was meant to be. "I think that's why I can't really regret what happened," he concluded, gently squeezing Camilla's hand. "However difficult it was at the time, however angry I felt at my father, in the end, his interference, however ill-intentioned, led us to a better place than we probably would have reached without it." "The paradox of transformative pain," Camilla commented thoughtfully. "How some wounds, when properly healed, leave us stronger, wiser, more complete than we were before." The triplets, noticing their parents' private conversation, waved from the bow, inviting them to join them to witness the first glimpse of the Newport coast appearing on the horizon. Raphael and Camilla answered the call, walking hand in hand across the deck they had traversed countless times over the years. As the familiar coastline gradually took shape in the distance, the distinctive palm trees of the main beach, the small lighthouse on the breakwater, the colorful houses gently ascending the hillside, Raphael felt the familiar sensation of return, not just to the physical place they called home, but to a state of fullness, of presence, of deep gratitude for the extraordinary path life had taken. And as the three stars sailed steadily towards port, propelled by the same wind that had once carried a newly formed family on its first great adventure, Raphael Sterling understood that the true journey had never been about distances traveled, ports visited, or even horizons explored. It had been, and continued to be, about the courage to choose authenticity over expectations, connection over acquisition, purpose over power. About the willingness to abandon an illusory empire for the incomparably richer substance of a life genuinely lived, deeply felt, deliberately valued. A real life, in all its glorious imperfection, its imperfect beauty, its undeniable fullness. Raphael looked at her with a smile that mixed affection and anticipation. Actually, I was hoping a specific architect would consider the project, a brilliant professional known for integrating sustainability, functionality, and beauty in revolutionary ways. He paused dramatically. You might know her. Her name is Camilla Hayes Sterling. Camilla's eyes widened, understanding the magnitude of the proposal. You want me to design the entire center? I don't just want you to design it, Raphael clarified, his tone now more serious. I want it to be our joint project, a true fusion of our visions, our passions, our respective expertise. You bringing your understanding of regenerative living spaces, me contributing with the educational and conservation experience. He navigated to another slide, showing a map. And as for the location, he continued, I found the perfect plot of land. The image showed a coastal area approximately 20 miles from Newport, with a mix of forested hillside and direct access to a protected bay with crystal-clear waters. It was close enough to the city to be accessible, but isolated enough to allow for genuine immersion in nature. The land belongs to the municipal government, he explained. It was earmarked for a luxury resort, but the project was abandoned due to environmental protests. I've been informally discussing a long-term lease for educational and conservation purposes with local authorities, and the reception has been extremely positive. Camilla absorbed every detail, her architect's mind already beginning to visualize possibilities, identify challenges, and imagine solutions. It's ambitious, she finally commented. Very much larger than anything either of us has done individually. Exactly, Raphael agreed. It's a project neither of us could accomplish alone, one that requires precisely the combination of skills, networks, and visions that we've developed throughout our separate but complementary careers. Camilla scrolled through the images again, studying each aspect of the preliminary concept. We'd have to divide our time between here and the center, she observed, especially during the construction phase. Yes, but it's only a 20-minute drive, Raphael replied. We could keep this house as our personal home. The center would be our shared office, our laboratory, our professional legacy. The word legacy hung between them, laden with meaning. Although they had never explicitly discussed it in such terms, both had reached that point in their professional lives where the question, what will I leave behind, began to gain increasing relevance. The triplets could participate too, in their own ways, Raphael continued. The center would have space for marine research that would interest Peter, documentary production aligned with Sophia's passions, and sustainable water sports programs that would resonate with Matthew's skills, not to direct them or constrain them, but to offer a platform, an available resource they could use if and when they wished. Camilla smiled, recognizing the delicacy with which Raphael approached the children's potential involvement, offering possibilities without expectations, opportunities without obligations. It was an approach they had developed together over the years, especially after Raphael so dramatically broke from the authoritarian parenting model he had experienced with Augustus. It's perfect, she finally said, not just as a professional project marker, but as a transition, a bridge to this new phase of our lives. The expression of relief and joy on Raphael's face was evident. Clearly, he had invested deep thought and emotion in the concept, not just as a professional endeavor, but as an existential answer to the question, what comes next? So you would accept, he asked, almost timidly, to be my partner in this new chapter? Camilla smiled, realizing the resonance with another question posed many years ago when Raphael had proposed marriage in that same house. I accept, she replied simply, leaning in to seal the commitment with a kiss. Partners as always. The following months flowed in a whirlwind of creative activity. Camilla completely immersed herself in the architectural project of the center, refining Raphael's initial concept into a comprehensive and detailed vision that harmonized form, function, and sustainability in innovative ways. Using her contacts in the world of sustainable architecture, she formed a small but talented team of collaborators, young architects, environmental engineers, and permaculture designers who shared her vision and could contribute complementary perspectives. Raphael, simultaneously, focused on the operational and institutional aspects, negotiating the land lease, establishing the legal structure of the foundation, developing partnerships with universities, environmental organizations, and progressive companies interested in supporting the project. His natural talent for connecting people and ideas, refined during years of managing ocean life, proved invaluable in this phase of building alliances and mobilizing resources. The seaside house, once strangely empty after the triplets' departure, gradually transformed into an informal operations center. The dining room table often disappeared under architectural plans and material samples. The shared office overflowed with environmental impact reports, educational program proposals, and sustainable financing plans. To their surprise, Raphael and Camilla discovered they were intensely enjoying this new phase. The triplets' absence remained a significant emotional adjustment, of course, especially at unexpected moments, like when Raphael automatically bought ingredients for 5 people at the supermarket, or when Camilla caught herself listening intently for sounds that were no longer there. But there was also a rediscovery, a reconnection between them as a couple and as creative partners that had brought renewed energy to their days. "It's strange, isn't it?" Camilla commented one night, as they worked side by side on different aspects of the project. "I miss them constantly, but at the same time, there's something liberating about this new dynamic." Raphael nodded, perfectly understanding the paradoxical feeling. "It's like we're rediscovering parts of ourselves that took a back seat during their upbringing," he reflected. "Not in a negative way. We deliberately chose to prioritize parenthood, and I've never regretted it. But there's an expansion happening now, a return to certain possibilities, with all the wisdom and experience we've gained in the process." Camilla smiled, recognizing the precision of the observation. It was exactly how she felt, not like a return to who they were before the triplets, but as an evolution into a new version of themselves that incorporated everything they had learned, grown, and developed as parents. The triplets, in turn, remained present even in physical absence. Weekly video calls brought updates on their respective journeys, Peter enthusiastic about discoveries in his research program, Matthew sharing stories from the surf circuit and the environmental projects that accompanied each stage, Sophia sending preliminary excerpts of her developing documentary. When Raphael and Camilla shared the plans for the Ocean Life Innovation Center, the reactions were characteristically distinct and equally enthusiastic. Peter immediately questioned about marine research laboratories and possibilities for academic partnerships. Matthew focused on the potential for experiential programs and the use of the bay for educational water activities. Sophia instantly visualized the narrative possibilities, how the center could serve as a hub for environmental storytellers, and how her own journey documenting coastal communities could connect with the project's educational mission. "You two really can't sit still, can you?" Matthew joked during a collective video call, his familiar smile lighting up the screen. "Most parents would probably start playing golf or something when their kids left home." "Golf?" Raphael feigned horror. "Do you really know us so little?" The shared laughter, even across the digital distance, reaffirmed the connections that remained strong regardless of physical separation. It was during one of these conversations that Sophia made a suggestion that immediately resonated with everyone. "What if we had a family gathering at the site of the future center?" she proposed. "Before construction begins, like a kind of informal launch ceremony. Just the 5 of us." The idea immediately gained enthusiastic support. Peter and Matthew checked their schedules and confirmed they could coordinate a brief visit to Newport within a few weeks, coinciding with a planned break in Sophia's travels. When the day finally arrived, Raphael and Camilla eagerly awaited at the airport, watching the arrival gate with the familiar mix of excitement and impatience that characterizes family reunions after prolonged separations. Peter was the first to appear, taller than Raphael remembered, his Miami sun-tanned face contrasting with the same discreet framed glasses. Then Sophia, her hair now cut in a shorter, more practical style, a professional camera still slung over her shoulder even after hours of flying. Finally, Matthew, his characteristic energy seemingly untouched by travel exhaustion, immediately enveloping his parents in an enthusiastic hug. For a moment, observing the 3 together again, Raphael felt an almost physical wave of emotion. There were evident changes after just a few months of separation, not just physical, but subtle alterations in posture, in expressions, in confidence, small signs of the continuous evolution from children to full adults, with their own experiences, independent perspectives, increasingly defined identities. The first day of the reunion was simply dedicated to reconnection, a prolonged lunch on the porch of the seaside house, detailed updates on their respective adventures, shared laughter about family memories and new experiences. The dynamic was simultaneously familiar and subtly altered, the triplets interacting not just as siblings, but as individuals who had experienced the world separately and now brought new perspectives to the family circle. The following morning, the five Sterlings drove to the site of the future Ocean Life Innovation Center. The land was impressive, even in its natural state, a harmonious mix of coastal forest, gentle slopes, and access to a protected bay with crystal-clear waters. Raphael and Camilla had brought plans, renderings, and even physical markers indicating where the main structures would eventually be built. "The main building will be here," Camilla explained as they walked through the property, with laboratories, classrooms, multimedia studios, and co-working spaces. "We'll use local natural materials whenever possible, passive cooling systems, integrated solar and wind energy, rainwater harvesting." "And down there, towards the bay," Raphael continued, pointing, "we'll have the Marine Research Center, with direct access to the water for field studies and educational expeditions." The triplets absorbed every detail, occasionally interrupting with questions or suggestions. Peter already visualized specific potential research projects that could be conducted in the bay's protected waters. Sophia identified ideal locations for image capture and documentary productions. Matthew considered how the space could be used to introduce young people from disadvantaged communities to water sports and environmental awareness. After a full exploration of the property, the five Sterlings gathered on a small natural promontory that offered a panoramic view of the site. Raphael had brought a bottle of champagne and glasses, not exactly practical for a nature walk, but appropriate for the symbolic moment he wished to create. A toast, he proposed, after serving everyone, not just to the Ocean Life Innovation Center, but to new beginnings, to chapters that close and others that open, to evolutions and continuities. The five raised their glasses, the afternoon sun reflecting off the glass and the golden liquid, creating small prisms of light. "To roots and wings," Camilla added, "to the security of the known and the courage to explore the unknown." "To family," Sophia simply completed, "whether it's physically together or connected across oceans." As they drank, Raphael observed the faces around him. Camilla, his partner of 2 decades, whose eyes still shone with the same creative fire and determination that had captivated him initially. Sophia, the sensitive and observant daughter who channeled her natural empathy into powerful visual narratives. Peter, the born scientist whose analytical rigor was balanced by a genuine passion for knowledge and conservation. Matthew, whose physical energy and natural charisma were increasingly directed towards meaningful causes. And he realized, with crystal-clear clarity, that this moment, this gathering on a windy promontory, toasting not just a physical project, but a shared vision, represented something fundamental he had sought his entire life, even when he couldn't precisely articulate what it was. A form of success that transcended financial statements or impressive titles, a legacy based not on skyscrapers or corporate acquisitions, but on values lived authentically, transmitted not through imposition, but by example. "You know what I'm thinking?" he said, after a moment of silent contemplation. "I'm thinking about my father." The others looked at him with slight surprise. Augustus Sterling was rarely mentioned in celebratory family moments. "I was remembering his last visit before he passed away," he continued, his gaze wandering to the horizon. "How he finally understood at the end of his life that he had incorrectly assessed what constitutes a true legacy." He paused, organizing thoughts he rarely expressed so directly. For most of his life, he believed that legacy meant perpetuating a name, expanding an empire, accumulating power. And he dedicated everything to that goal, sacrificing relationships, authenticity, even his own personal satisfaction. He looked at the triplets, who watched him with genuine attention. "You barely knew him, but his impact on our lives was profound, both for what he did and for what his story taught me not to do." He smiled faintly. including that intercepted letter, which at the time seemed like a tragedy, but which eventually led us exactly where we were meant to be. Camilla gently touched his arm, understanding the emotional depth underlying the reflection. "I think he'd be proud," Sophia surprisingly said. "Not of the way you're building this, without exploitation, without manipulation, without sacrificing what truly matters, but of the final result, an institution that will have a lasting impact, that will transform lives, that will leave the world a little better. I think even Augustus Sterling would recognize the value of that." Raphael looked at his daughter with renewed appreciation for her emotional perceptiveness. It was a perceptive observation, the suggestion that his father might, eventually, have recognized merit in a legacy different from what he initially valued. "Perhaps you're right," he replied thoughtfully. In his last days, he seemed to be beginning to understand that there are different forms of success, different types of achievements that are worthwhile. Peter adjusted his glasses, his characteristic gesture when preparing to offer a carefully considered perspective. "There's a concept in ecology called succession," he commented. "It's when an ecosystem evolves over time, each generation of organisms modifying the environment to create conditions for new types of life to thrive." He paused, checking if everyone followed his analogy. "Perhaps it's like that with families too," he continued. "Each generation creates conditions, both positive and negative, that influence the possibilities available to the next, not deterministically, but as a set of circumstances from which the next generation makes its own choices. So Grandpa created certain conditions for Dad," Matthew elaborated, surprising everyone with his quick grasp of the abstract concept. "Dad made choices within those conditions, but also created new conditions for us, and we'll do the same eventually." "Exactly," Peter confirmed, clearly pleased with his brother's interpretation. "It's a way of thinking about continuity without determinism, about how we're connected to the past without being controlled by it." Raphael observed the interaction with silent admiration, the ease with which the triplets navigated complex concepts, the depth of their reflections, the ability to contextualize their own experiences within broader structures. All of this evidenced the kind of development he and Camilla had always hoped to foster. "I think that deserves another toast," he declared, refilling the glasses. "To ecological and family succession, to the choices we make within the circumstances we inherit, and to the new possibilities we create for those who come after us." The 5 glasses met again, the crystal-clear sound briefly echoing in the afternoon air. They remained on the promontory for some time afterward, talking, laughing, occasionally falling into comfortable silences as they absorbed the view, the company, the moment. Sophia eventually picked up her camera, discreetly capturing the family interaction against the backdrop of the land that would soon be transformed. When they finally returned to the house, already early evening, Raphael found a moment to speak with Sophia in private, while the others prepared dinner. "Those photographs you took today," he commented, "would they be the beginning of a new project, documenting the center's evolution from the start?" Sophia smiled, her expression revealing that he had precisely identified her unspoken intention. "Actually, yes," she confirmed. "I was thinking of a long-term documentary, not just about the physical center, but about what it represents, about transitions and continuities, about how individual choices can create ripples that affect entire communities." She paused, organizing thoughts that were evidently well developed. "I started to realize, during my travels documenting coastal communities, that the most powerful stories are those that connect the personal to the universal, that show how internal transformations lead to concrete external changes." Raphael nodded, recognizing the depth of the observation. "And does our family story fit that pattern?" he asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "Perfectly," Sophia replied without hesitation. The transformation from the ruthless corporate executive to the committed environmental educator, from the conventional architect to the pioneer in regenerative design, from a family that could have been defined by privilege and isolation to one that chose purpose and connection. She looked at her father with an intensity that reminded him of Camilla in her most passionate moments. "It's a story worth telling, Dad, not in an egocentric or self-indulgent way, but as a case study of transformative possibilities, of how small choices accumulate into life changes and eventually into tangible community impacts. Raphael felt a wave of emotion at his daughter's clear articulation of a process he had lived intuitively, but rarely formulated so explicitly. "I would be honored if you told that story," he said sincerely, "with all the honesty and nuance it deserves, not as a simplified heroic narrative, but as a complex human process, with errors, doubts, occasional setbacks, and gradual advancements." Sophia smiled, already visualizing aspects of the project. "I'll need access to the family archives," she commented pragmatically. "Old photographs from your time as CEO, documents from when the house was built, records from the first great voyage on the 3 stars. Anything you want," Raphael promised, a smile forming with the rapidity with which his daughter had moved from philosophical conceptualization to practical production considerations. "Though I should warn you, there's an embarrassing period in the 90s when I had long hair and tried to look like a rebellious executive." The comment elicited a laugh from Sophia, exactly as intended, easing the emotional intensity of the moment. "That definitely needs to be in the documentary," she declared, with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "The audience deserves to know the full truth." The week of family reunion passed quickly, a mix of practical planning for the Innovation Center, impromptu adventures on the 3 stars, now sailed almost exclusively by the Triplets, with Raphael and Camilla as passengers, and quiet moments of reconnection in the house that continued to be the physical heart of the family. On the eve of the Triplets' departure, each returning to their respective commitments, the family organized a special dinner on the porch. Camilla had prepared everyone's favorite dishes, a tradition they had maintained since the Triplets were small. Raphael had opened a bottle of special wine he had saved for significant occasions. As they enjoyed the meal, conversation flowed naturally between light topics and deeper reflections, shared laughter, and occasionally heated discussions about issues important to everyone: marine conservation, sustainable housing policies, ethics in documentaries, social inclusion through sports. At one point, observing the interaction, Raphael was struck by a powerful realization. The family they had built together was simultaneously a safe haven and a launchpad, a space where each member could return for reconnection and renewal, but also a starting point for individual explorations, personal growth, unique contributions to the world. It was, he realized, exactly what he had secretly hoped to create when he made that transformative choice 20 years earlier, not a legacy based on obedience or replication, but one founded on authenticity, purpose, and responsible freedom. After the dishes were cleared and the conversation gradually subsided, Raphael raised his glass for a final toast. "To choices," he said simply. "To the small and the large. To those we make consciously and those we make instinctively. To those that define us and those that transform us." He looked at Camilla, silently recalling that crucial moment in the Newport hospital when he discovered the newborn triplets and made the choice that would completely redirect his life. To choices that seem impossible at the moment, but eventually reveal themselves as the only true paths, he continued. And especially to the courage to make those choices even when the outcome is uncertain. The 5 raised their glasses, the soft clinking of glass echoing in the quiet night. "To the family we chose to be," Camilla added softly, "not defined by blood or name, but by the values we live together. And to new chapters," Sophia completed, her voice carrying the emotion they all felt, "are the ones we've already begun and the ones yet unimagined." As the stars gradually appeared in the night sky above Newport, Raphael Sterling silently contemplated the family circle gathered one last time before another temporary separation. Each face softly illuminated by the table candles, Camilla, the triplets, representing not only his present, but also his future, not as extensions or replicas of himself, but as autonomous individuals connected by bonds of love, respect, and shared values. And he understood, with a clarity that brought both peace and renewed purpose, that the choice he had made so many years ago between a corporate empire and an authentically lived life was not really about abandoning a legacy, but about discovering a different and infinitely more valuable one. Not a legacy of skyscrapers and acquisitions, but of transformed lives and transmitted values. not of control and perpetuation, but of freedom and evolution. Not based on the fear of insignificance that had driven his father, but on genuine love for what could grow naturally when cultivated with intention, care, and respect for individuality. The next morning, at the airport, the goodbyes were emotional but not melancholic. There was a shared understanding that physical separations were temporary, that real connections remained intact regardless of geographical distance. "I will keep you updated on every development of the center," Raphael promised, hugging each triplet, "and we hope you can participate meaningfully, each in your own way, when your schedules allow. And remember that your home will always be here," Camilla added, "not just as a place to visit, but as a base to return to whenever you wish or need." The triplets nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind the simple words, the assurance that, no matter where their individual paths took them, there was an anchoring point, a space of unconditional belonging. "See you at Christmas," Matthew exclaimed, as he walked away towards the boarding gate, his characteristic enthusiasm intact even at the moment of departure. "I'll send weekly updates on the research project," Peter promised, adjusting the backpack loaded with scientific equipment he had insisted on carrying as hand luggage. "And I'll send preliminary documentary excerpts for feedback," Sophia added, kissing her parents one last time before following her brothers. Raphael and Camilla remained at the airport until the flight took off, a tradition they had maintained since the first time the triplets traveled alone years earlier. Finally, hand in hand, they walked back to the parking lot. "And now?" Camilla asked, as they drove back to Newport. Raphael smiled, understanding the multiple layers of the seemingly simple question. Now that their children had left again, now that the center project was officially in motion, now that they were definitely in a new chapter of their lives, "Now we keep sailing," he replied simply, "following the compass that has always guided us, not towards predetermined ports, but towards horizons that call to us." Together, Camilla squeezed his hand, the gesture communicating complete understanding without needing additional words. As the car drove along the coastal road, the sea visible in the distance gleaming under the morning sun, Raphael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple letter, a letter his father had intercepted in an attempt to protect an empire, inadvertently catalyzing the creation of something far more valuable. A real life, in all its imperfect complexity, its authentic beauty, its irreplaceable richness, a life deliberately chosen, consciously lived, deeply valued, a life that, even with all its challenges and uncertainties, he would choose again, every day, without hesitation,